Hello and welcome to yet another brilliant Monday here on OurGame. Myself, Shane Stimpson, joined as ever by Michael Burney. We've Stephen Poacher joining us very soon to talk all things football. Reminder, we're brought to you by OurGame. If you want to get maybe this sweet little Mayo number, that Roscommon one there, both teams into league finals next weekend, go to OurGame, use the promo code OurGame. For example, loads of jerseys across the board, so get over there and check them out right now. Best in the business. Michael, how's tricks?
All good, yeah. Just a mad weekend, wasn't it? Some couple of days action. The only pity is that we probably should have split it all between Saturday and Sunday and not had things flying under the radar yesterday. But just a mad day yesterday. All sorts of different scenarios and consequences of games. It's brilliant.
It really was. It was class stuff. I mean, I thought Kilkenny and Cork was really good. It's a bit of a slow burner, but geez, we really saw the potential that Cork have. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Waterford just blew Wexford away at Nolan Park yesterday. What a dominant performance there. Nisha Waldron was down there. If you want to check out the video, he did a report from on the road on the way back up. As I said, we're going to have Stephen Poacher on to talk about Dublin getting relegated. That's one that I don't think people at the start of the season saw that coming. Obviously, we all saw, right, maybe they're kind of fading off a small bit. But do you actually think now, and I'll just throw this out broadly and people get your comments in, are Dublin no longer an All-Ireland contender this year? I would say that they still are, Michael.
I think they're still an All-Ireland contender this year. I do, but next year could be a little bit different. Like, if you look at the amount of players that Mayo blooded, we'll say, in this Division 1 league, and James Horn is in no doubt going into the championship that a lot of these guys are ready to play championship football. Whereas if you look at next year, Dublin will have played Division 2. You know, how much will they really have learned if they'd stayed up in Division 1? Oh, a lot of these emerging players, you'd learn so much more about them. You'd know whether they're up to that standard. So I do think they're All-Ireland contenders this year. Next year, I think that might drop off a bit. I know I was chatting Paddy Christie last week, and he said that Dublin aren't going to slip off the face of the earth, but he does think that they're going to slip incrementally. And I think falling to Division 2 will probably play into that as well.
Yeah, get your comments in, and on any topic GA related, let us know what you're thinking. We'll bring Stephen Poacher in now. Stephen, how are things with you?
Not too bad, lads. How's things?
I'm not sure if you just heard us talking there about Dublin, and look, they're still hot favourites to win Leinster this year. But after what's happened now, do you still see them as an All-Ireland contender this year?
I think so, Shane. Yeah, I think there's probably, you know, I was looking at it last night. I was probably perceivably thinking, like, you know, it's not the unthinkable, but even the two teams that come up from Division 2, like Roscommon and Galway, you know, if either team sort of obviously got a bit of momentum and got a couple of wins on their board in the championship, and all of a sudden you might just have to catch maybe somebody from Ulster in a one-off game, and all of a sudden you're in an All-Ireland final. So, like, perceivably, Shane, for the first time probably ever, there's probably about 8 counties that could possibly, you know, definitely make an All-Ireland final and quite possibly win it, you know, because I think things have leveled out a little bit this year across the board. Like, obviously, Kerry started the National League off, you know, extremely well, of course, like, and you know, but Tyrone showed on Sunday there even some of Kerry's vulnerabilities, like even the fact that they were caught again with the long kick out over the top that Tyrone caught them with in the semi-final last year, and you know, they were caught again with that type of kick out. But going back to Dublin, you know, 118 points conceded in the league this year, Shane, 11 goals conceded. You know, it would be a worrying factor, like, and you know, like we played a club game there at the weekend against a Dublin club side, and it was actually Michael Shields' club, the goalkeeper, St Sylvester's club. Like, and you know, I was just chatting to a few people from the club about Dublin in general, and you know how things were going and stuff. And like, there just doesn't seem to be, Shane, you know, the same level of togetherness or fight or spirit. Like, even some of the balls that players were looking at. Like, I was watching the game yesterday, I was thinking to myself, like, it's harsh to say this, like, but you're actually questioning, like, geez, are these players really do or die here? Are they in that mentality today? Are they scrapping for their lives and battling for every ball? Because it just didn't really look like that, you know. And like, Monaghan weren't anything spectacular yesterday, to be fair. Like, they weren't you know, they didn't play, you know, unbelievably well, but they still, you know, won a game that, to be honest with you, Shane, Dublin probably should never have been allowed to come back into, you know. So look, the problem that you have, Shane, is it's as simple as this: the provincial structure is so imbalanced, like, and you know, they're still going to win Leinster at a canter. No one's going to beat them in Croke Park and Leinster. I can't see it. I don't even think Kildare will beat them in Leinster, Croke Park. So, you know, it is an opportunity for them probably to get the show back on the road as such, you know. But yes, look, perceivably that they can still possibly be thereabouts, and more likely will see them in an All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah, but just to take that point up on the fight, like when they conceded the second goal, which was that penalty that Jack McCarron put away, they scored 3 points in a row to pull it back, to pull themselves back to within 2 points. Then late on in the game, they're down 3-12 to 16. They score 1-2 unanswered to get themselves back level before obviously missing a chance through Lee Gannon late on, and then obviously there was the winning score. Like, to me, that showed a bit of fight and a bit of spirit, Stephen. I actually came away from it thinking maybe there is still something to this team.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, look, I'm maybe highlighting small moments in the game, Shane. You know, small moments like we even just like probably like if you go back and look at the game, you can obviously put 4 or 5 examples of times where they did show a bit of fight and a bit of spirit, which is only natural. At the end of the day, they're competitors, and they're, as I said before, Shane, here yourself, like they are the greatest team that we've ever seen. You know, the 6-in-a-row team, probably one of the best coach teams ever. You know, but I just feel under Jim Gavin, what James McCarthy. 5 years, 6 years with Gavin, no red cards, 2 red cards already with under Desi, and just small wee things with the discipline and just small little things slipping, and and you never hear any rumblings from the Dublin camp, like never heard anything, and all of a sudden now you're thinking there's a rumbling that Conor Callahan's not happy, and other players are not happy with the level of coaching that's going on, and different exam players are talking, and that never would have happened, Shane. Never would have happened. And when things get really, really tough in the heat of battle, all those little things will come to the fore then, and you will ultimately struggle to win those real tight matches, because maybe they just don't have that same level of unity or togetherness, like that the spirit, for example, that Tyrone would have shown down in Killarney on Sunday, and having that real tight togetherness and spirit, like, can carry you a long way. And I just think at the minute, Shane, there's a few little fractures in the camp, like, and it's very, very evident at this stage now that it's a team that's hugely on the slide, like.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, just an interesting one, Stephen. Like, say, like Rian O'Neill's goal in the first league game, that sort of thing that you never see happening usually with Dublin. Probably hadn't happened the last couple of games. Then all of a sudden it kind of rears its head yesterday. Jack McCarron left 1-on-1 with Mick Fitzsimons. This kind of, and once Monaghan broke the line a couple of times, it was like the Red Sea almost parting, which is really, really unusual for them as well. As you say, 11 goals in the league is totally unheard of. 11 goals conceded, very few goals scored as well, like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I said this, Michael, we said this way at the start, like, when they were hemorrhaging scores for fun, like, I just thought they would have reverted to type and went back to what they were really, really good at. And, like, let's be honest, like, Dublin were, in their plum, Dublin were very, very defensive, like, really, really well defensively organised. That was the foundation for their success, and that was the solid grounding that they had to build their platform from. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, obviously I haven't done the complete research on it, but I am nearly sure there was one year in particular, and it could have been the COVID-ridden year, where they didn't concede a goal in the championship. And I think it was the year that they won the All-Ireland. Yeah. Remember they blitzed Mayo with a couple of early goals, I think it was, and I think Mayo scored not 15 that day. I don't think they conceded a goal the whole way through the championship. They played Cavan in the semi-final. They didn't concede a goal in Leinster. Like, that's a record that the likes of Stephen Cluxon, for example, would have been hugely proud of, and would have demanded great standards and great excellence. And maybe there's a nervousness as well with, like, the chopping and changing of the goalkeeper, the personnel, and players being rushed back maybe who weren't fully fit, etc. And you could just see a very, very disjointed Dublin this year. And you're right, Michael. And I remember a great quote from a coach one evening in one of the coaching seminars we were running, and he talked about you shouldn't be chasing the game, you should be facing the game when you're defending, and Dublin just spent a huge amount of their time chasing games, like, and you just see them scrambling, Michael, just scrambling back, disorganized, no structure, no real, defensive template that you would really associate Dublin with. And that's what I thought they would have went back to. I thought they would have went back to basics, and maybe got the likes of Scully and Bulger and these guys, maybe just to play at 10 and 12, just say, look, you're dropping back in, we're tucking in, we're playing a double sweep or whatever it happens to be, and we're shoring this up early, and we're going to grow into the game with bouts of possession, but it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
You're right, Stephen, about 2020. Didn't concede a goal at all during the championship, and they cantered to the title that year. A question I wanted to ask you about is, these key players for Dublin, Brian Fenton being the most obvious example, brilliant over a number of years at this stage, but really struggled to get into the game. Can't think of him punching through the line too often, getting those scores from in and around the D in the scoring zone that he gets that look great. Niall Scully didn't, we didn't see what we've seen from him the last few years. In fact, like I came away from the game wondering, geez, what Dublin player has really impressed me today? And I couldn't really think of too many.
Shane, I went to university many moons ago with a guy from Cork, actually, a guy called Paul McCarthy. He's now a doctor, sports psychologist. He's a resident sports psychologist in St Andrews Golf Course in Scotland. A hugely intelligent guy, and I remember the most simplistic advice he ever gave me when I was at university. He says, Stephen, it's very simple. He says, football is a game of confidence. He says that's what football is. Football is a game of confidence. And if you think about it, Brian Fenton went, lads, for so long not having ever lost a game, not having ever lost a football match in a Dublin jersey, a competitive championship game. I don't know what the statistics were, Shane, but it was something phenomenal, like 5 or 6 years without losing a game. All of a sudden you lose one, then you lose two, then you lose three. And if you look at it now, they lost 5 league games this year. They lost the All-Ireland semi-final last year. So he's now experienced 6 defeats in a very short period of time. And this is not a personal dig at Brian Fenton, because he's a phenomenal footballer and a fantastic midfielder. But you wonder the psychological aspect that has to your confidence. You wonder, has the confidence taken a hit now? Maybe he's afraid to break those lines. Maybe he's not just getting on the end. Maybe the moves aren't just as fluid, And there's a whole host of things that start to creep in when it's like anything. Like winning becomes a habit, losing also becomes a habit, And then when those wee things, Shane, start to creep in, the confidence takes a knock. Being brave, being bold, taking those opportunities on. Like I thought that a wee bit of their mojo back last weekend against Donegal, in Croke Park, and I actually thought Donegal were decent enough that day. I thought McBrearty was very good that day, but Brian Hard kicked a lovely point the outside his foot, and there seemed to be a wee bit of a swagger back about them again, and I thought, geez, something. And I didn't see them losing that game in Clonus. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't see them losing the game in Clonus, and I was surprised at how the game unfolded now. Very surprised.
Especially when you consider that Monaghan had conceded 24 points against Kildare the week previously. So
yeah.
How impressed were you by Monaghan?
Listen, Monaghan, and they're maximising everything they have, Shane. And I think Jack McCarron, I used to laugh and joke with a brother of mine. We used to laugh that Dimitar Berbatov used to play for Man United, and he used to love Christmas time. He always scored on Boxing Day, So we used to say Berbatov loves Christmas. Jack McCarron just loves relegation D-Day, because he just seems to pop up every year with monster scores and huge moments. And listen, Jack McCarron came on the scene. I think, come back to about 2017, he sort of burst onto the scene. I remember playing them in a challenge game with Carlo at the time, and it was around about December time. It was way down in Monaghan. We played them. We went to sort of a bonding session before Christmas, and McCarron was playing, and I was wild impressed on that day. I thought to myself, geez, there's a really good footballer, and sweet left foot, of course, but he sort of maybe flattered to deceive a wee bit then, Shane, over the next number of years, and maybe Conor McManus and his peak and playing out of his skin, probably maybe, overshone him and things like that as well. But he's got a spark back, and maybe the fact that Conor McManus wasn't playing on Sunday, with a lot more responsibility and ownership was given to him. But they have the confidence to chip the keeper and love the keeper in such a crucial game and such a big moment. A lot of players would have tapped that over the bar for a score, maybe, or a point, just to keep the scoreboard working, as coaches would tell you, keep the scoreboard ticking over. But super impressed, Shane, with their fight, their spirit. Always, never in question in Monaghan. I went to watch them against Mayo. I went down to Clonus with a friend of mine. A good friend of mine, his first cousin's Ryan O'Donoghue from Inernary here. So we went down to watch the game. Mayo were playing Monaghan. And even that day, they're never beaten. Even at the end, there was a goal mouth scramble. They should have beaten Mayo that day. And Monaghan could be perceivably looking at being in the top 2 or 3, in this league very easily. I know they had a very difficult day against Kerry, where Rory Began sort of obviously was caught out the field, and there was a few goals and things like that as well. But they're just, Shane, they're just a dogged outfit. And I'm fearing for down in the championship, because the disarray that we're in at the minute, and the spirit and the togetherness that they'll take from staying up. My God, we could be in for a tough day in Clonus in 3-4 weeks time.
Yeah, Michael, what do you think in terms of Monaghan doing that with Conor McManus only coming on in the 73rd minute? That just shows that they're more than just a one-man team now.
Yeah, it's probably a bit like Kilkenny without TJ Reid at the moment, Shane, I'd say. And it's a good sign for the future, because they can't rely on him forever. And it's good that other lads are stepping forward. Jack McCarron had his appendix out 4 weeks ago. And Dick Clerkin said in his column today in Independent, he's cousins with him. He dropped into his house, he had his feet up, appendix out. And a month later, he's delivering, You know, it was a real tour de force yesterday. As Stephen said, to even have, like, very few players would even have it in their head, the possibility of a lob like that. Like, most people, like, I was at the Offaly Cork game yesterday, and the Cork midfielder burst through twice and hand passed the ball over the bar with the goal at his mercy. Like, there's very few players that are, you know, modern day players that are thinking like McCarron is. And even to send Beggan back and to not want Conor McManus near the free at the end, that was just, you know, his chest was out. He was 10 feet tall yesterday. It was an unbelievable performance, and I suppose the big thing with Jack McCarron is just staying injury free. If he can stay injury free, there's no reason. Like, people maybe would have classified him as a more of a winter footballer, maybe not a summer footballer. That was summer conditions yesterday. That was the best he's played in many a year, I'd say. So Monaghan people will be hoping that he can stay fit, and because he's the one to drive him forward over the next couple of years. And like the foil to McManus is still going to be there and still going to contribute, but they need other lads stepping up. The fact they did it without Micheál Bannigan and a few other players yesterday was hugely encouraging, I'd say, from a Monaghan point of view.
Big Drew Wiley back in there as well, Shane, like, you know, the old dog for the hard road, like, as I say, you know, and like, they're a hugely experienced team as well, Michael. You know, they've got a lot, like, down the spine of their team. Like, those lads have serious miles in the legs. Like, and I remember coming across Kieran Hughes about 12 years ago in an under-21 game. So Kieran Hughes must be the guts of 32, 33 now. Like, but I just remember looking at him at 20 years of age, 19 years of age. He was like a man already. You know, he's like, physically, he was like a man already. The way he kicked the ball with the outside of his foot and the delivery of his passes and stuff. And you're just thinking to yourself, Jesus, there's a fine footballer coming through for them. But like, those lads have been in the road a long time, Shane. And the other thing too, Michael, to consider as well, their club sides have always been very, very strong. You know, the likes of Scottstown, they're a great run in Ulster Club Championships, and that has hardened them as well. So they've got huge level of experience, and every year you write them off. Monaghan's done. That's all I ever hear. Monaghan's done, you know. But they always unearth one or two players. Like big Mohan there at full forward there was unearthed this year as well, and he's been a handful. And you know, he's a real bull, a real target man, real aggressive, and you know, can win dirty ball and that. And but defensively, like the likes of Ryan Wiley, and I know you talked about you know, Shane, last week about, you know, moving McCarthy back to wing back and just reinventing themselves with the same personnel. You know, they're just reinventing themselves. They're not bringing in 10 new faces every year, but they're reinventing themselves, you know, maybe tactically or structurally or positionally. You know, they seem to just reinvent themselves. And listen, boys, I'll tell you now, they were very, very close to beating Tyrone last year. Very, very close to beating Tyrone last year. And if they had beaten Tyrone last year, you know, they could have got to a final. You know, they're another team you wouldn't rule out. You wouldn't rule them out.
Donegal beat Armagh by 114 to 113. Obviously, tensions boiled over and there was a big fracas towards the end, Stephen. But would you be impressed that, considering the amount of negative commentary around Donegal this year and, you know, the way that they move the ball slowly and just don't really kick it enough, and just, you know, a lot of different questioning of them and where they're going, and has their peak already passed and they haven't delivered? It's a good win to get in a very tight game against a tough opposition.
Yeah, and listen, Shane, Donegal historically now have had really, really good underage teams coming through for a number of years, and I know the success mightn't have been sort of evident in trophies as such, but they've come up at following underage football here at Ulster. Like, Donegal have a lot of really, really good underage talent coming through. You know, it's a conveyor belt. They've got a lot of good structures in place. Their development squads are well organised and things like that as well. But look, you know, for me, Donegal have the forward, Shane, to play a certain brand of football and a certain way. And if they were a bit bolder and a bit braver, I do feel they would probably get more scores on the board and maybe more attractive to watch. But I think Michael Murphy still remains, Shane, a critical figure for them. You know, he still is the man. I think when he plays, their team is a completely different dynamic. I think the opposition looking at it in a different way as well, because all of a sudden you have an issue in your hands where who's going to mark him, who's going to pick him up, where's he going to play. There's so much flexibility with Murphy. But I felt last weekend was the first time, Shane, against Dublin, that I seen a wee bit of spark back in Paddy McBurdy, a real wee bit of spark back in him, you know, and I think he had a decent game as well on Sunday. Now, I can't comment too greatly on the game because I haven't seen the game yet. I've only seen brief highlights, and I think they were more concerned about showing the schmozzle at the end last night than they were showing the football. So it's hard to judge, but I haven't been chatting to Kieran McKeever, but I know they were delighted with their league campaign in general. I think they were over the moon. The fact that they were getting into the last day of the season contesting a league final position, which is fantastic for them, and shows the progress that Armagh have made as well. You know, under Kieran, the three Kierans, I suppose, have all contributed in a real positive way to the coaching, and I think they're a hugely organised team. Armagh, they're maximising their resources, they're very like Monaghan as well, in the fact that same personnel has been around for a long time now. But you're asking me about Donegal, Shane. I just do feel, Shane, they'll come up short. I just feel they'll come up short, and I'm not sure if Croke Park suits the game they play. I think in Croke Park you need to be able to kick the ball a little bit more and be a bit more direct. And in fact, I would actually probably say the likes of like maybe an Armagh, for example, are probably more suited to playing in Croke Park because they do like to kick the ball quite a bit, But no, the style of football, Shane, that they played in some of the games now was very stagnant and it was hard on the eye. Now it was hard on the eye, But look, they've done enough. They're still in Division 1, and they've done enough, and that would have been their main objective at the start of the year. Is let's stay in 1 for another year,
And which Kildare are not, after losing 220 to 18 points against Mayo. There won't be a Leinster team in Division 1 next year. That's going to be the first time ever, Stephen. Would you have predicted that at the start of the year? Maybe you would have predicted that Kildare would go back down.
Yeah, look, I think Kildare were probably on everybody's lips to go back down, and I know I've been critical of them in the past, like, and taking a fair bit of stick, about the abuse I've given them. Like, I haven't really given them abuse. I've just been calling out what I see. I think there's good footballers in Kildare. I just think they needed to get their house in order, and I think this year they did, Shane, and I think they have. And I think that Glenn Ryan can take a huge amount of positivity from the league campaign, despite the fact they were relegated. Their performances were actually quite good, and there was a consistency. And you know what there was about them, which is the first time I've seen in Kildare, there was a proper edge and bite to them. And like, you go back to the Newbridge or Nowhere situation, which was 2018? Was it 2018? Newbridge or Nowhere 4 years ago. So you go back to the Newbridge or Nowhere, and the emotion and the tension and the passion that a full house in Newbridge brought. Like, and I actually thought Newbridge was rocking that day they played Dublin. It was mental, and like, that gives you energy, and it also gives the players energy. And I think the fact that there's supporters back in Newbridge this year obviously has helped Kildare. It's one of the counties that they've helped. I think it's helped Armagh as well, because they play the athletic grounds extremely well, and when the athletic grounds is full as well, it's a tight and tense atmosphere as well, for visiting teams, like as teams have seen this year. But from a Kildare perspective, Shane, obviously very, very disappointed, I'm sure they are, that they've been relegated, but I think they can take great heart from their campaign. And honestly, like, let's be honest, in Leinster, they're probably the only team that could perceivably beat Dublin. I don't think they will in the championship, but they are probably the only team that could perceivably beat them now. And I think I think some of their forwards are starting, like Jimmy Hyland's been around the squad now for 3 or 4 years. Jimmy came through that successful under-21 team, of course, like, and he's now stepping up. He's now stepping up to the mark. Daniel Flynn seems to have got his act together. The nonsense has stopped. He's more, he seems to be more focused on the football and not the silly stuff. And that is important, like, and when you've got forwards of that caliber, playing really well, it's like you need 3 or 4 good forwards, Shane. No matter what you say, every team needs 3 or 4 good forwards now to win a game and to win a big game
Michael, what about Kerry? So a bit like Dublin, there's a small bit of a goalkeeping issue, and that's something you do not want coming, when championship is right next door to us at the moment. They lost at home 2-11 to 115 against Tyrone. But yeah, what do you make of that from Kerry's point of view? First defeat for Jack O'Connor in his third coming.
Yeah, the only thing is that they were through to a league final already, so they didn't, we'll say, tank maybe to the extent that Galway did against Roscommon, because they were, they knew they were through already. But it is a defeat. It's the first time, as you said, they've been beaten in Killarney by Tyrone since 2003. I do want to ask Stephen about the goalkeeping thing. Jack O'Connor seems to have gone, week on, week off with his keepers, which, fair enough, I know you have to learn throughout the league, but how do you get that consistency of knowing exactly what your keeper is going to do? And I know they're both doing the same things on the training field, and they have the same plans for kickouts and the same calls and signals and things like that. But it is very hard to develop that level of consistency, Stephen, surely, if you're chopping and changing. Like, I don't know, is he any closer to knowing who he's going to play for, who he's going to start for the championship, which has to be a bit of a worry when the kickout is more important than ever now in football.
Yeah, look, you're looking at probably 30 kickouts a game, Michael. So it's become such an integral part of it. Like, and I know our own county here as well, the same boat. Like, Down have used 4 keepers this year already. Like, and it doesn't probably fill your defence with confidence either, Michael. Because you want someone who's established, who's number one, who is first choice, building relationships. Like a goalkeeper, builds relationships with his players in the same way as a forward will build relationships with someone he's playing inside with. You know, even maybe a wee look or a wee signal or whatever it happens to be, and people get to know his kickouts and get to know his strengths and what he's capable of. And you know, it's huge. Like kickout strategies now have become so important, and particularly when the pressure's on. If you've conceded 2 or 3 scores in a row, Michael, you know, it's so important that you have an out ball, that you have an out kick out, that you have a go-to kick out that you can go to. You know, I mean, you've got a confidence. The other thing too, Michael, you've got to remember as well, go back to my statement about football being a game of confidence. If you're chopping and changing your goalkeeper, that's not good for the keeper either, because a goalkeeper is in a very high pressure situation in that if he makes a mistake, it's globally highlighted. You know, a mistake can be a match defining moment if he drops a ball or spills one into the net, and it can be very, very difficult for a goalkeeper to recover from that. So goalkeeper needs, for me, out of all the players, like, you know, an outfield player mightn't play, but he can run, or he could play an in-house game. But a goalkeeper needs games, but he needs games, and he needs regular games, I feel. And I think it's a huge issue for them. I think they're going to have to make a call and stick with it. But listen, when you've got the calibre of forwards that Kerry have, you know, like, is it that big an issue? Like, you know what I mean? You're sort of wondering to yourself. And they have good ball winners out the field. They have big men out the field, you know, even more than the likes that they can win ball and can win their own ball. So, like, is it that big an issue? I don't know. But look, there's very, very few goalkeepers in the country that are playing at the level of Niall Morgan or Began or Sean Patton. You know, it's like Armagh, you know, their own problems too. Like, they've obviously put Blaine Rafferty in the nets as well. You know, teams are chopping and changing now to try and find the right dynamics. But it's vitally important, Michael, that there is a level of consistency to the goalkeeping situation. But it's interesting now that Tyrone did get the win down in Killarney, because I think there would have been a roadblock at Galway for Paddy Tally on the way home from Kerry if they hadn't have got the win. You know. And I know them Galway boys, like, you wouldn't mess about with them, man, I can tell you.
Just on that, Shane, when you go down through all the goalkeepers, you know, Cluxton in goals for Dublin for God knows how long, you knew he was going to be there. You knew what he was going to do. We'd say Owen Murphy in goals for Kilkenny, Patrick Collins in goals for Cork, Nicky Quaid in goals for Limerick, Rory Began in goals for Monaghan. You know, like, it's the one position where you really have to probably nail your colours to the mast, say you're going to develop this keeper. And, you know, the lads in front of him in particular, like, the goalkeeper has an effect on the whole pitch, really. And
as a goalkeeper, you don't want to be thinking that my position, I mean, best will in the world, you don't want to be thinking, geez, I make one mistake here now and I'm out of the team. Or, you know, you see that with some counties, and they do have 2 lads who are neck and neck, and it can probably end up spoiling both of their confidences in a way. So that is definitely something you don't want to be carrying into championship. But, you know, at least for some of these teams, they have another game. Kerry have a league final coming up. They'll be cantering through Munster. But by the time they get to the end of Munster, they'll definitely want to have that answer. I do want to jump onto Division 2 here. And Stephen, your thoughts on Roscommon? So they're obviously after getting promoted back again, and they've been the ultimate yo-yo team for the last number of years. Obviously, you know them very well, having coached them. But it was somewhat skewed and unfortunate for Derry. I mean, Derry messed up by getting hammered by Galway with those 4 goals. But Roscommon had to show up and beat a Galway team that, let's be honest, probably, well, they'd nothing to play for, really. So are you going to get the A side of Galway in that game? So it sort of skews the integrity of the final round of games a little bit.
Yeah, it did, Shane. It's just the way the games fall. I'd say when Anthony looked at the fixtures, I'm sure he was looking at those last 2 games thinking, my God, you know, Derry and Galway could come down to them too, you know, and particularly the record at Roscommon against Galway, like, they haven't beat Galway in the championship in the Hyde in 40 or 50 years. So, you know, it would have been a game that they would have been nervous about. I'm sure he'd been delighted to see that they didn't appeal Paul Conroy's suspension, that they left Walsh and Comer out and Finnerty and that, you know, and like, I think the fact that Galway rested those guys, Shane, and this is one thing for me, I actually felt, Shane, that it was a mistake by Galway, because I'm looking at thinking to myself now, if you were playing next week in a league final, I'm going to go to the 2 league finals next week in Croke Park, but if you were playing in the league finals next week, as a Galway player, would you rather be playing Derry or Roscommon? And I would say they'd rather be playing Derry, you know, particularly in Croke Park. And I felt that they've sort of opened the door a wee bit for Roscommon there. And that win will give Roscommon great confidence, Shane. Great confidence. You know, there's unquestionably, it will give them great energy, great belief, you know, great togetherness. And they've kept their forwards fit this year. Their key men, their main men, which is hugely important, because for a squad, Roscommon's big issue when they go to Division 1 is probably the squad. That's the big thing, you know. But Division 2, you can maybe get away with 2 or 3 missing, but maybe not so much in Division 1, Shane, you know. That's the big issue.
Yeah. What your own thoughts, Michael, just on Roscommon being the ultimate yo-yo team?
Yeah, well, it's kind of unfortunate because, like, to yo-yo between Division 1 and Division 2 obviously means you're in around 7, 8, 9 in the country every year. Now, it's breaking through to that next bracket of getting into the top 5 or 6 is probably the difficult thing. But if you look back through, the last decade or so, like Roscommon were in Division 3 in 2012. They were still in Division 3 in 2013. They got promoted from Division 3 in 2014. They played Division 2 2015, Division 1 2016, stayed up 2017, and then they've yo-yoed up and down ever since. And we probably underrate the fact that they are in around that really top tier. They're just ever so slightly outside it, but they've been remarkably consistent, particularly the guts of the last decade. And it's unfortunate that they just fall between the two stools. Probably not good enough for Division 1 and too good for Division 2.
They were the most impressive team, Shane, I seen this year against Down. They were the most impressive team. Now, Down did let Roscommon play, and when you let them play, they can hurt you. They've got some brilliant forwards. Cal Hennigan this year has been a great plus for them, because Cal was man of the match in the Sigerson final, and last year he strained his quad just before the Division 1 campaign started, and that was a big blow, because it's another man to come in off the bench, or another forward to have, or another option, which you need in Division 1, unfortunately. But Alex a big end of there, still playing some serious stuff. He seems to have got himself into really good shape, and along with Donny and Coxie as well, like those guys are shooting the lights out at the minute. Cian McKeown, a very, very underrated player. Cian's nickname's the Bull, and there's a reason, because he's a seriously direct runner. He's a good, strong, aggressive runner. Roscommon are full of really good forwards. But I'll tell you one thing, lads, that I got my eyes open down at the time was they've a great structure in place, underage structure. They're doing a lot of really good work behind the scenes, and their whole big challenge, and this is what talking to Brian Carr, the chairman, one evening about it. They feel to stay in Division 1 and to compete at the highest level, they need a conveyor belt every year of 3 to 4 players coming through that are going to freshen up the senior panel, rather than have lads, this sort of once in a generation group that come through, win a Connacht under 20 title, win a Connacht All Ireland, and then you don't have anything for 4 or 5 years. They want to try and establish like a long sort of steady stream of 3 or 4 players coming through their academies. And like one thing Anthony Cunningham is doing, like he set up an under 23 development team, and things like that as well, and putting really good structures. Anthony's trying to put really good structures in place. Anthony's not just there for a short-term fix. Like Anthony's looking to leave, a legacy or a long-term pathway there for players to come through the senior level. I'm delighted he stayed on for another year, because he deserved it, and he had a difficult year last year. We all had a difficult year last year with COVID and Division 1 and not getting a win against Dublin or Kerry or Galway, and it was hard, and then you lose the game against Armagh, and all of a sudden you're going through the season, your confidence is rock bottom. So it was brilliant for them. And I was delighted for them. I texted a few of the boys last night to say that I'll be able to put my feet up next week and have a pint in the premium section of Crow Park and just shout abuse at Galway, for in a nice, relaxed manner,
The premium section. Do you mix those normal folk? No,
I'm premium, Mike. I just want to drop that in there. I'm premium level.
Yeah. Shane, just a quick one as well on Roscommon. While Offaly won the under 20 last year, it probably flew under the radar somewhat. Like Roscommon are obviously in the All-Ireland final. They're going to be up in Division 1. A good few of those guys are going to be hitting 2021. Like, if they're, it'll definitely give them an even better chance of staying up. And for the development of football in the county as well, they'll have a heap of lads coming through in amongst that senior squad. Like a real good options to help out your Enda Smiths, your Donny Smiths, and these older lads. So that probably flew under the radar with Offaly winning. All the talk is about the talent that we have coming up. But Roscommon have huge talent coming through.
Big Walsh, the full back from that team, Michael. He played a wee bit in the FDB league, or is it FDM league, or the
FBD, yeah, FBD.
I still call it the McKenna Cup, but it's guys call it the McKenna Cup. But he played a bit in the pre-season competition. I think he played in the final against Galway. I watched it on TG Carr, and really, really fast game. It was played in the Connacht Dome, but he's probably just not ready for that level just yet, and they probably just didn't trust him enough. So they had none of the under 20 team playing this year, which is interesting. But as you say, there's a lot of them in the panel. There's a lot of them training. There's a lot of them, if Walsh is marking Connor Cox or Enda Smith or Cal Hennigan at training, that's going to bring him on tenfold, and then obviously next year when you get another pre-season under his belt, couple of games maybe, in that pre-season competition again, and then that's another lad that you could maybe try to unearth, because he's big, strong and physical, But it's no, listen here, look, hats off to them, and again they've a great draw in the championship. They've got Sligo. As I said to Cunningham last night, I said, like, since I stepped away, but the luck's hanging out of him, So we didn't have as favourable a draw last year, but listen, they will beat Sligo. I think they'll beat Sligo. They'll not take Sligo for granted, but they'll beat Sligo. and then Galway and Mayo come out of the other semi-final, so it'll be interesting. Like, but that's a team, Shane, that I think are very, very underrated. I think Galway are huge potential when they've everybody fit, everybody playing. And I think John Dibley's added a bit of steel to them defensively as well,
Yeah, Michael, you were in O'Connor Park yesterday for arguably the most dramatic game going. Monaghan against Dublin was obviously hugely dramatic, but Cork won 121-120. Offaly had themselves in a decent old spot, leading in the dying embers of the game. Cork forced an equaliser. Offaly take the short kick out. It's directed back towards the goalkeeper. He can't pick it up. He realised that the centre-back didn't realise in time. Goes back to try and keep the ball in play. Goalkeeper puts his toe to it. Handy free and Cork win the game. Can you explain the drama in the ground? And by the way, did you instantly recognise, oh God, the keeper can't touch this ball here? And did you see the sort of disaster unfolding, which are looking through your fingers?
Not as the ball is kicked back across, but then when you see him standing, you're kind of thinking, like, why isn't he playing the ball? Decky Hogan is running away from the ball. Paddy Dunnigan is trying to call him back to the ball. It was just a real, like, at the one time we needed to hold on to the ball for that to happen. It couldn't have happened at the worst time. I think Paddy Dunnigan actually is after delivering a few missiles on Twitter there, basically having a go at the rule. But that's the way the rule was put in place, basically, so that you just couldn't hit a sharp kick out to someone and give it back to the keeper. And it's basically to try and increase the excitement, I suppose. But if he had let the ball go wide for a 45, listen, Stephen Sherlock probably would have put it over. But there's a potential that he could have missed the ball. Offaly could have won the kick out and just kicked the point that we needed to win the game, because we had to win the game. Whereas once Sherlock put over the free, and he was never going to miss a free from the 13, they were 1 up. Then we had to force a goal, and it was just, it finished, not that it finished in a damp squib or anything, but we had put ourselves in a really, really good position. We were 6 down. Stephen Sherlock actually hit 7 points in a row from Cork, from 1-6 to 1-13. He was absolutely outstanding. He was unmarkable between that time, but we got ourselves back into the game. Niall McNamee at 36, just brilliant at the edge of the square. Johnny Maloney back as captain, driving it forward. Anton Sullivan probably had his best game for Offaly, and what was his 100th competitive game for Offaly. We were a point up in injury time. Cian Kiley came on for Cork, kicked an absolute peach to draw them level, and then that kind of farcical scenario happened at the end. But like, if we'd played football like that throughout the league, we would have probably been safe before yesterday. But just really disappointing from a Cork point of view. Like, they celebrated that like they were after winning a championship. That'll maybe show you how far they have fallen, if that's what they're clinging on to. But just disappointing, really disappointing from an Offaly point of view, having put ourselves in a position to retain our status and stay in the Tailteann Cup as well. Or stay away from the Tailteann Cup, I should say.
Yeah. Stephen, just your own thoughts on that. Like, Cork, I was just looking at the league table here. In Division 2, they have the worst defence, 138 points when you convert goals conceded, which is worse than Offaly, who've been relegated, much worse than Down, who were conceded 115, really. So what are your thoughts on this Cork team? People have been very hard on them in recent times. Is there an issue with them celebrating? Like, Monaghan celebrated like they won the All-Ireland after staying up themselves, and I thought, good on you, really.
Well, maybe, Shane, it's important for them to stay up, particularly for that group. Now, I was reading an article last week. I don't know what article it was, but I was reading a piece where they'd lost something like 21, 22 players, from last year. So it's been a difficult job for Keith Ricken. I think for him, coming in at the start, Keith's obviously coming in with, a real innocence and freshness about, the way he wants football to be played and how he speaks to people and things like that as well. And I sort of like a person who's going to be themselves and who's not going to change, for the sake of just becoming an inter-county manager. But it's a tough gig, Shane, and like, I seen Cork playing once this year. I've only seen them playing once, but I was very impressed, Michael, with Offaly in Newry that night when they beat Down. I was very impressed. I thought there was a great bit of spirit about them, a great bit of fight. That some good forwards. Anton Sullivan came off the bench that night and had a huge impact that night. But Shane, for the size of the county and the money that they have, and maybe they don't have money, I don't know, but I'm assuming like when you have a sponsor like Sports Direct and you've got everything in place, and Park and Queeve, like, and I know chatting to Benny, he went down to Cork to the Down game. And he was in the stadium. He says, like, what a stadium, like, beautiful stadium, and nobody in it. Nobody in it. No supporters. Like, the footballers very, very poorly supported, and you could hear the echoes. You could hear the players talking on the pitch, and it's sad too. Like, a county of that size and stature, and historically, traditionally, like such proud sporting people that are actually at that level now. But then Shane, this is the thing, like, it's a bit like ourselves and Down. Like, I think Declan Bogue wrote an article last week, and he says, like, the only thing separating Down from Westmeath, Fermanagh, all these counties, the only thing currently separating them now is that they've had a wee bit of an illustrious past. And that's similar with Cork. Like, Cork are no different now to Offaly or Down or Westmeath or any of these teams, because that's the level they're at. That's where they are at, and unfortunately, it's time to build for Cork. It's a building block for them now. And like Michael, Cork have had some fine underage teams coming through. And like, I remember playing them a lot of years ago in the minors. Who did you call him? Was it Bobby O'Dwyer? Bobby, a nice fella, was over the minor team. And we played them down in Dublin. And they were getting off the bus, and I remember saying to McCartan at the time, I said, Jesus, James, are we playing their minors or their under-21s here today? Because they were getting off the bus, and they were huge, like, I mean, huge men, like, 6'1", 6'2", and we're running around with, like, nobody over 6 foot, and we're looking, going, geez, where's our big men? Like, but it's a strange one, Shane. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answers, but I just know that looking in from the outside, like, something has got to be wrong, lads. Something's got to be wrong, because
it's interesting. Even a comment here from Grode Ogo Gracon. He says, when Clare played Cork for a league doubleheader in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, after the hurling, it seemed more Clare supporters stayed for the football than Cork, which, and I'd see that down at Semple Stadium as well. There'd be a bit of an exodus anytime there's a doubleheader and the football is second. Just, Stephen, I know you've only got another minute or two really before you have to go, but Down lost again at home to Clare 2-14 to 1-9. That's 7 years in a row for Clare in Division 2. But just your thoughts on Down, and then also back-to-back promotions for Mickey Hart with Louth is highly impressive.
Yeah, it is. Look, it definitely is. Like our own county, Shane. Like, have you got a couple of hours? No, I don't even know where to start. Like, but we're in a bad place. But we really are in a bad place. Like, our minors were beat at the weekend. They're 3-13 to 1-6 against Monaghan, and there needs to be a complete read out of a complete rebooting of the whole thing, Shane. From the bottom up, and until that happens, like, we're going to continue to fall further and further away from it. And look, there's an awful lot of stuff going on that's political and all sorts, and I don't really want to get into it, because at the end of the day, it would just put me in bad form. Like, and I'm enjoying my own coaching at the minute with the school and the club, so let them at it. Like, but listen, it's disappointing from a Down perspective. Like, there's a handful of boys trained during the week, and for the players, it's a pity for that generation, because there's good footballers there, there's good players there, and they're sort of missing out now on some of their best days. Like, and it just doesn't seem to be a really nice environment to be in. But look, Mickey Hart, yep, back-to-back promotions, brilliant. And I think a special mention as well to Billy Lee in Limerick, because I think it's unbelievable, because I just remember playing Limerick, like, and coming up against them, and Billy Lee's a nice guy, and I spoke to him a few times this year on different occasions, and such a nice fella, and he's doing it for the right reasons. He's doing it for the love of Limerick. He's not getting a load of money, he can tell you that. Like, he's not getting well looked after as some of the outside managers and things like that will be getting, but he's doing it for the right reasons. He's lost a serious amount of players, lost a serious amount of experience, rebuilding again. Hurling is number one there. First and foremost, hurling's number one in Limerick, let's be honest, and there's no other way about it. But the 8 different scores at the weekend there, Shane, Ian Corbett's long-standing centre-half back, they're playing centre-half back, great servant to Limerick, hardy chap, you have young Josh Reiner, full forward as well, scored 1-6 the weekend. Like, they've scored 10 goals this year. They've scored 10 goals in a Division 3 where most people probably would have said, well, Limerick will probably be one of the teams that go down, because they spent so long in 4. Like, so I think it's maybe 12, 13 years, since they had a really vibrant team, Limerick. I think at the time Mickey Nate O'Sullivan was over them. I think they got their couple of Munster finals, and they were very close, actually, I think, to maybe getting over the line in some of those Munster finals. So it's great to see him getting promoted. And as I texted him the other night, that says to Dublin and Croke Park next year is a tasty one for him, because I'm sure at the start of the year he wouldn't have thought that they'd been playing Dublin next year in the National League, So listen, hats off, and look, from Division 4 as well, Shane, I think you tweeted about it as well, like Tipperary, the start that they got, you were just thinking, geez, the arse is going to fall out of it for Davy Parr and the boys. Like, but
you're very politically correct with your words, Stephen, in fairness.
Yeah, no. Hey, you would have thought that, because like looking at where they were 2 years ago, Munster champions, and and I know obviously they've lost a few personnel and things like that as well, but listen, Davy seems to be a really good coach, and they've dug it out, and again they've got promoted along with Cavan, which is no big surprise. Like, but it's disappointing, Shane, how the league's ended in those sort of couple of instances you talked about, like Sligo, Leitrim. having to play on Sunday, I think it's disrespectful. It probably wouldn't have happened in Division 1, and then you have the situation where, not Galway's fault, but, teams are putting out, resting their main men and key men. I'm sure Derry were going down the road to Navan thinking, oh my God, when they seen the Galway team, knowing deep down that, they had no chance of getting promoted. So I don't know what you do there, but there's not really much you can do. Such, so,
well, I suppose for Derry, just keep the thing in your own hands from the get-go and don't concede 4 goals against Galway. So they probably only have themselves to blame.
Yeah.
But look, I'd say you have to run back to school there, Stephen, but it's been brilliant having you on and getting your insights as always.
Listen, man, it's a pleasure as always. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, well, chat to you soon. So you were speaking to John Mahon after the game against Cork, and he was talking about the Tailteann Cup. What was his thoughts on it? Because, there is so much negative connotations around it in terms of, you don't want to be stuck in the Tailteann Cup or whatever. But I still firmly believe if it's treated with respect and it can be a brilliant competition for a lot of counties.
I'd agree with you, and I think Offaly are definitely one county that it can be. Like I said to you last week, Shane, that I'd love if Offaly stayed in Division 2 and could play in the Tailteann Cup, if you know what I mean, because I think winning the Tailteann Cup or being really competitive and getting to a final stage would be great for the young players we have coming up. So maybe Offaly are a slight exception to it in that I think it will benefit them massively. And John Martin said something similar. He just said it would be easier for us because we were looking at a young enough crop of players here that would benefit enormously from a Tailteann Cup. I was involved in the B Championship, with that B Championship with teams in the past, with Clare and Fermanagh, where we went on and won it, and it certainly gave momentum to build and get experience. Every game you go out and play, you learn something new. He said, I don't even know when the bloody thing starts. I know it finishes in July, but we have the Leinster Championship to look forward to first. It will move on pretty quickly, but I'm hoping our lads embrace it. It's my job to ensure that they do. And I think that's, I'm sure they will embrace it. If anything, we finished the league, albeit been relegated. We finished the league with a bit of a flourish. We got a great result, as Stevie says, up and down. Should have beaten Meath. Probably should have beaten Cork yesterday as well, having come from behind. And just a quick point as well. Some of the scores that were got yesterday, particularly into the town end in O'Connor Park. Niall McNamee scored 2 points, which you could only call them banana efforts almost, aimed like 20 yards out to the right, coming back in. Bill Carroll got 2, the exact same. Some brilliant scores. It was real kind of championship fare, lads taking shots on from 45 yards out, conditions perfect, lads hitting the ground running really hard. It was a brilliant game. Just unfortunate from our point of view that we just came out on the wrong side of it.
Yeah, now just to run through some of the other results that we probably haven't fully touched on yet. Antrim, they lost at home to Westmeath, 12 points to 113. Longford beat Laois 217 to 113. And as we already talked about, Limerick, they beat Fermanagh 116 to 14 points. Just in Division 3 then, for anyone who doesn't know, Laois, they're gone down along with Wicklow, and Louth and Limerick are after getting promoted. Then Division 4, just to run through the results, they already knew their fates, Sligo and Leitrim, which is that they couldn't get promoted. But 216 to Sligo, 210 to Leitrim. Tipperary beat London to ensure a 5th win in a row and promotion. That was 114 to 12 points in Thurles. Cavan battered Waterford, 321 to 10 points. And Carlow drew with Wexford, 14 points to 111. So Division 4 finished up with Cavan on top, Tipperary second, Sligo just a point behind them, so they'll obviously be feeling a little bit sore. But obviously they lost in Thurles, so what can you do? Tipperary on merit are ahead of them. Carlow, they finished second last, and Waterford finishing bottom of the Football League. And as Stephen pointed out there, I was tweeting after the game saying some great stories across the Football League. Has any team recovered from a better poor start than the Tip footballers? 1 point from the first 2 games, followed by 5 wins in a row to gain promotion. And a few of the answers, Derek Lynch of Clare FM, he tweeted that Clare are now 7 consecutive years in Division 2, some level of consistency. Stephen Miller, actually, I thought this was a very good tweet. Stephen Miller of Laois Today. Louth lost to Laois in the first match, got an equaliser in the 8th minute of injury time against Longford in round 2 to draw, and then won 5 in a row to top Division 3. They were 5 down with 15 minutes to go against Limerick in round 3. So absolutely great recovery there. Any final thoughts on the football before we move on to the hurling? Yeah,
the only other one I'd say is about Longford kind of saving their bacon and Billy O'Loughlin sending his own County Laois down to Division 4. I know Longford were prime candidates in nearly everybody's eyes to go down to Division 4, and then Longford turned around massive. They got a couple of huge results on the road. They beat Laois on the road, and they beat Westmeath on the road earlier on this year as well. 2 big results, and that was probably against the grain the other day. I saw Laois the first time out as well against Louth, and I thought they'd be up the far end. So it's just amazing how things can turn, how quickly they can turn. And just a word on Billy Lee as well. Billy Lee made 53 calls in 2018 that were all unsuccessful, trying to get lads into the squad, 53 different players.
Wow.
And 4 years time, he's turned it around unbelievably well. And a lot of that is to do with academy structures that they have with Paul Kinnerk and Pa Ranahan and all these ex-players in around that Mickey Ned O'Sullivan vintage, putting in huge time to churn out those players. And they're only just starting to see the benefits of that academy with the likes of Josh Ryan and these lads coming through. And there's plenty more to come over the coming years. Division 2 football is some boost for them.
Yeah, and plenty of comments here supporting the Limerick footballers and where they can go. Flash says Limerick footballers will win the Sam Maguire in the next 10 years. Fergus Butler says Limerick for the double.
Can I just say on that, Shane, I just think it's going to be fascinating. Paul Kinnerk will work in football in the coming years. I guarantee it. It's just going to be interesting if he works somewhere else and then comes back to Limerick. But he's done so much work with that academy. Will he be the one to start, to maybe bring them to another level? At senior level in the next few years? I think that's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, Thomas Galler adds, Limerick can only get better. County Board has applied the hurling template to football and they have a good development squad. And I wonder then with Kinnerk, because a lot of what Limerick do, there's a bit of a football template to it in terms of getting lads back, wing forwards, have the graveyard shift up and down. So that's not totally revolutionary in hurling because we've always seen certain elements of that. Like look at the Kilkenny team that was dominating during the noughties especially, and I suppose a lot of the tens as well. They were doing that also. There was a sort of a football setup. Mick Dempsey being involved, 9-time county champion in Laois football, that kind of suggests that. So I'm wondering, would what Paul Kinnerk obviously wouldn't have the exact same game plan. Obviously not. That would be very silly and short-sighted to say something like that. But would he be as revolutionary within football, where probably tactically that game is a nice bit ahead of hurling, I would imagine?
Yeah, I just wonder. I know from just a couple of times that I've interviewed him that he's thinking about it an awful lot, even though he's involved in hurling. And you have to remember, like, if you were going coaching in football, that wouldn't come as naturally to you. Hurling would. Football is his game that he played the whole way up, so I'm sure he looks at it differently. So I just think it'll be fascinating. I'm sure if he does go into the football sphere, he'll have a lot of very tempting offers, but I'm sure he'd love to continue on the work that he's done. Like what's he doing? He's doing a master's, he's lecturing, he's coaching the Limerick hurlers, and he's heading up the Limerick Football Academy. Like, he doesn't have to do that. So it's obviously something that's a huge passion to him. So I think it's only a matter of time before that passion transfers over to senior level.
God knows where he gets time to sleep. We'll talk more hurling now. So the Division 1 semi-finals were on at the weekend. Cork 127, Kilkenny 220. So that's the Rebels into the final there. Waterford pasted Wexford 520 to 16 points. In the relegation playoff, Antrim won by 324 to 217. Really good performance, especially down the stretch. The Division 2A semi-final, Down will actually be joined now by Westmeath, who saw off Kerry by 218 to 21 points. Division 2B semi-final saw Sligo narrowly beat Donegal 120 to 119. The relegation playoff, Wicklow beat Mayo by a point, 16 to 15. The Division 3A semi-final saw Roscommon lose by 5 points to Armagh, 122 to 20 points. And the Division 3B semi-final, Longford 126, Leitrim 213, which is a fine scoreline to put up. I'm just going to start off with a couple of comments here and just get your own comments in and let us know what you think about all the games at the weekend. But first off, it's from @OnTheInside8 on diving. Now, this was on Twitter. The players diving now is hard to watch as well. Simon Donoghue and Bennett both knew what they were at. Austin Gleeson got the red card and Hanlon was blessed he wasn't caught. Stupid retaliation, but the diving needs to stop. Okay, so a lot of people are hot on the notion of diving. And look, let's go straight to the incident in the Waterford-Wexford game. Austin Gleeson getting red carded. So he did let the hurley back. I don't think he did that much damage to Simon Donoghue at all. Simon Donoghue, when the red card was being issued, he was almost acting like, no, don't be given the red card. But he'd gone down and made a meal out of it as far as I was concerned. Now, I think he made a meal out of it, but I do think that Austin Gleeson deserved a red card. Both of those things can exist because if you put that... Now, I'm not saying that Austin was necessarily going for the nether regions, but if you do put the hurley back in that direction and it does connect, it can obviously just, be a very unpleasant thing and potentially dangerous thing. So I think you have to make sure that if a player, flirts with doing something like that, that they have to get red card because you have to set the tone on that. But would you take this point on, I suppose, maximising a foul or sort of play acting a small bit? What are your thoughts on that and what our viewer has said there?
I don't like it at all, to be honest with you. I don't like it at all. Just going back to the incident, so it probably starts at Aussie running in around the goal and Simon Donoghue maybe helping him into the hoarding, shall we say, ever so slightly, and he kind of runs into him thereafter. And I can't see Donoghue, dunting him or anything on the way out, or maybe, I don't know, maybe he's saying something to him or something like that, and Aussie swings back. Now that, like, Donoghue clearly wasn't badly injured by it, as you can see by how quickly he got up. Now, as you and I well know, he could have easily been very, very badly injured by that, and it could have had all sorts of other effects. But it's just I don't like to see players going down. No. If he hadn't gone down, would Aussie have gotten red? Is another question completely, because a lot of the time the reaction plays into. I'll give you an example. Do you remember when Bill Cooper nearly took Richie Hogan's head off in the 2019 quarter final, and Richie Hogan got up straight away, like it was literally like the Undertaker rising from the dead when he hit the canvas and he's back up again. I don't even know if he got a yellow card. Whereas you look at someone going down maybe easier than they should. It maybe forces the referee's hand a bit more. There's gamesmanship in that, and I like certain elements of gamesmanship. I don't like that because it borders on soccer, and it borders on what's the word, simulation. But Aussie should not be putting himself in those positions, especially after the performance he was after giving. And we'll probably go into it here now, but you can cut to the video of Liam Cahill and what he thought. Yeah,
I don't think you need to be fluent in Tipperary chat to know what he's saying there and the specific term being used. Effing is obviously in there, but I think ape is the term being used, which is a very common term to use when you're disappointed with someone down home.
Yeah, and like Liam Cahill has some debts there too. Like, I don't know if he caught eyes with Aussie as he was going back to the stand, but he absolutely cut daggers through him. Now, he did say after, and he just said that on the incident and whether they were going to appeal, he said, I didn't see it. I'm not taking the soft option here. I genuinely didn't see it. We're going to have a look at it tonight. I don't think there was a lot in it, to be fair to Austin. Obviously, the referee had to act on his umpire's instructions. That's the directive when you're an inter-county referee. If your umpire sees something, they have to act. If it's a case that there's any grounds for appeal, we'll definitely have a go at it. He said we'll have to have a look at it. And I think, to be fair to John Keenan is my type of referee, generally lets things go. He doesn't want to send off lads generally, but kind of left in a position there where he has no option. And Jack O'Connor definitely left him with no option as well. That was a pretty bad tackle, his first one for that yellow card. Very robust, quite dangerous as well. And then, like, just ridiculous throwing the hurl at the goal. It just like this. That's so frustrating for Darragh Egan. That's the sort of thing where you're already, absolutely bulling over a defeat, and then something like that goes and it just rubs salt into the wounds. Really, just a really silly sending off.
Yeah, it's impetuous. It's small. It's even a small bit immature. Like to do that, your team is already getting paddled. You've conceded 5-20, and you allow your own personal frustration to get in the way of. I was really. What are you laughing at?
No, I just thinking you said some word like petulant or something like that, and I remember Dunphy. Ronaldo is a display of petulance, that kind of thing. But it was just very. And Jack O'Connor's actually had a really good league, generally, and he's been one of their better players, and that's just. Listen. Sometimes when things are going wrong, like when it rains, it absolutely pours, and it poured on Wexford yesterday. And just a really disappointing end to the league for them.
Mark says Gleeson form is hurler of the year, most consistent player in the league, consistent last 2 years. Yesterday he will learn from. Everyone can see Cahill would have let him. Cahill would have let him know.
Liam Cahill wouldn't have even needed to let him know. Didn't really, like, do you know what I mean? He'd know himself straight away and would be hugely disappointed by that. It takes the shine off what was just a brilliant display. Like, he gave Paddy Foley all sorts of problems there. Cut in and got two absolutely beautiful goals.
Yeah. Sean O'Sullivan says he's referring to another commentator, River Power. River Gleeson is always targeted. There's a photo of him with Brolly in Antrim and his fingers are bleeding. He gets it constantly because people know he will fall for it. Robert Muldoon. Sean, it's rare that you finish any hurling match without bleeding fingers. I wouldn't use that as evidence of being targeted. Everyone gets bloody fingers, hands, but he last year or so, he looked to have calmed down, but back to square one, the verbals and the wind-up merchants will be smelling blood.
Now, I don't think it's back to square one at all, Shane. I'm not sure what square one is, to be honest with you. He's been involved. He's been involved in a couple of different incidents. Maybe that the one before the 2017 All-Ireland final as well. But he's a robust player. Like he gets stuck in, he gets physically involved. I wouldn't like to take that part out of his game. It's just those needless things, like that slap back is totally needless, and that's something that's very controllable. And that's the first time in a good while that he's allowed that to happen. And listen, he's probably going to miss the league final now. I don't see them getting a successful appeal, to be honest with you.
I can't see how.
No. So listen, much better to learn your lesson, miss a league final, even if they were to lose a league final. And his loss was a part of that. He'll be available for Munster. At least he's not going to, you hope it's a lesson learned for later on in the season and it won't happen again.
Yeah, a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get one of these sweet little jerseys here, this Mayo one, maybe that Roscommon one, any of the ones that you'd see on the website there, they've all counties covered. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. Great stuff there. By the way, if you want to see Thursday's show, that'll be Patreon only, patreon.com/OurGame. Works out about 50 cents per show, and even less if you just sign up for the annual subscription. So, Michael, after the game, Darragh Egan was talking about energy. And he mentioned it a few times, and Joanne Cantwell mentioned it on the Sunday game as well, that he had brought it up 3 times. But why on earth, and how on earth is talking about the team seeming to lack energy, how is that a valid excuse? Because, you've won 5 games in a row. I'm sure that the players haven't been flogged in the last week or so. So how on earth is this a valid excuse? Maybe it's more so the team was set up poorly and your key players did not fire at all, rather than... Is that a way of just basically giving the players a pass publicly? He'll obviously hammer them privately and look to work on things, but it's just saying energy is off, just a bit of a sort of just fob things off and just be very generic in general about it.
I think he's probably learned a bit from Liam Sheedy, I'd say, to be honest with you, from a few of the poor Tipperary performances. Like, I remember Liam Sheedy coming out. Remember Tipperary got absolutely annihilated by Kilkenny in Nolan Park in a league game in 2009. I remember Brendan Cummins writing about it since, and it was in his book that Liam Sheedy basically came into the dressing room and just said, "Hands up, my mistake, whatever. We go again, whatever." Energy levels were down, and they hopped off Kilkenny in the league final, hopped off them in the All Ireland final, and beat them the year after. You can't throw your players under the bus. But you're asking me, is like a lack of energy a valid excuse? Like, of course it's not. It's definitely not a valid excuse. I think tactically. And just look at the Waterford goals, for example, right? So one of them was, a lovely little pass from Desi Hutchinson over 2 defenders. There shouldn't have been 2 defenders in there. The other defender should have been back on Aussie. Look at the Aussie's other goal where he was able to solo through, wasn't met by anybody. Look at Shane Bennett's goal and look at Jack Prendergast's goal where they soloed through from out the field and weren't met by anybody. I think it was more to do with tactically in the position of players on the pitch. Maybe there was a lack of energy as well. But I think I'd be hoping from a Wexford point of view that there'll be an awful lot of lessons learned, because like Waterford walked through them at different stages. That could have been 7 or 8 goals. And that's not to even talk about the puck out malfunction as well, which is probably really, really worrying too. But they've been here before, Shane. They were here after the Walsh Cup final, turned it around brilliantly. You would say the energy levels were fairly low that night in that Walsh Cup final. They turned it around brilliantly, won their next 5 games. They were here. I think you might have tweeted yesterday, actually, about, the ability to turn around a season after, what's been really positive, and then, this real sharp low, and then trying to lift things again. But in fairness, in 2017, in Davies' first year, they had a really good league, got promoted from 1B, Tip hit them for 5 goals in that league semi-final, also in Nolan Park. I think they were only beaten by 11, but they were beaten comprehensively. That was the day Davy ran into Jason Ford. And then they were still able to come back, get to a Leinster final, beat Kilkenny in Wexford Park for the first time in a long time. So they have shown the ability to learn on the job. but the consistency that Darragh Egan has craved, and that he keeps saying that Billy Walsh and Gordon Darcy are saying the one thing about high-level sport, consistency, get ourselves playing at a really, really high level. That's a massive low now yesterday. I do think they'll bounce back, but it probably highlights a bit the gap between Leinster and Munster as well. The gap that we have, that we've kind of always said is there, particularly with the top 3 in the country. And we had Munster teams the top 5 at the end of last year. Not sure, like a Leinster team might come in at 4 or 5, but there's still a lot of dominance in Munster at the moment.
Yeah, Ace Ollie 180. Wexford players waiting for the ball to come to them and caught on multiple occasions yesterday. You can't stand still in today's game. What I would say is I do feel that a couple of times Wexford were hard done by. Patrick Hearn, when he was soloing up the field to assist one of the goals, he did look to me like he was knocked out over the sideline, but I couldn't say it for certain. But then on the flip side, Rory O'Connor, when he was initially hooked or blocked, and then he scooped the ball back in with his hand, which you are allowed to do. You can actually
that was
smack
brilliant.
The ball in. Yeah, you can actually smack the ball into the net like that. If it just comes to you, you're allowed to smack it in. I didn't think that was out over the line. So both calls really went against Wexford there when they were very, very marginal. I thought that was quite harsh.
Can I just say, Shane, on that sideline call, a big bugbear of mine now is linesman just putting the flag up the second you go near the sideline. And whether he was in or out, at least he definitely tried to keep the ball in. And the linesman didn't just put the flag up just because his body was out and it maybe looked like the ball was out. So I have to give kudos there. I do agree with you on the Rory O'Connor one. I don't think the umpire could have seen it happen that quick. You couldn't have seen if it was ever so slightly out over the line. And that was a turning point. Well, not a turning point, but it definitely would have given Wexford a bit of hope anyway.
Yeah, and do you know what? I looked through the game here and the notes that I had yesterday, and I think everyone just saw just the simple eye test without even writing down any notes. Waterford are stone mad for goals here. And Wexford could not create them. Like, obviously they did around the 23rd minute when Rory O'Connor he soloed through the instance I'm just talking about with the disallowed goal from Mikey Dwyer. But in the first half, you had Waterford creating 6 different goal chances, whereas Wexford had that one opportunity. They had 2 chances in the one instance, even though the second one was disallowed. But it was just 6 goal chances, and Waterford could have had so much more. So I totally take up your point on that. Another thing was like Mark Fanning having his puck outs intercepted. Obviously, this game won't amount to a hill of beans by the end of the season, but they were just punished so harsh for them. And I just loved the way Waterford just ran straight at them, didn't take the old handy point and pressed those goal opportunities. Like Desi Hutchinson, was this another sign now that he's really ready to explode this year? And then just the final point, just like Wexford have won 5 league games. I know you just took this point up, but it really feels like they're going into the championship now, licking their wounds and wondering what's happening. Because I went through the team yesterday and I saw Kevin Foley, for example, who's been brilliant as a sweeper in the last number of years. He was named at number 6. And midway through the game, I was like, wait, did they make a change beforehand? Is he actually not playing? And I think he's a great player. But whatever way, he just wasn't really in the game at all. Liam Ryan wasn't his dominant self. And I came away from it wondering, like, Conor MacDonald, who went off injured, and that's another big blow to them now because you'd hope he's okay. He wasn't in the game either. Rory O'Connor was to some degree. But I just wondered, where are the key men for Wexford? It was such a poor performance and takes such a shine off the league.
Yeah, it does take a shine off the league. There's a couple of points there. Wexford, particularly at the back, they looked like they were fixated on the man that they were marking a lot of the time. Which is okay if you have one lad doing a man marking job and you have to track Tony Kelly and you just abandon everything else and track him. But like, I remember seeing one instance where Liam Ryan actually was running away from the ball and running away from the man with the ball because he was tracking his man. That happened a couple of times, and it didn't look like they were working in unison. Do you know the way someone's coming, one man steps up, another man steps across, another man steps across, and you fill in the gaps. That's the way it works. Just didn't look like that was happening yesterday. Bit of a system malfunction for them. Just to take up the Waterford point you said, I think Waterford have 18 goals in the league so far. A couple more. I think if they hit 20, that'll be the most goals ever scored in the league by a team at Division 1 level anyway, which is absolutely outstanding. And I do think they kept the powder dry on the goal front against Tipperary and even on Kilkenny. And I'm not saying that it was a conscious thing against Tipperary, but I definitely think they'll be looking at hitting 5 or 6 against Tipperary if they get half a chance come the Munster Championship. But
But we're in the long grass. What are you talking about?
How long is that grass?
But it's so long, it's actually slowing us up. So that might be contributing to bad performance.
The only thing on that as well is because Wexford and Waterford and Cork and Kilkenny, they're the teams that are still going. The focus is all on them. It does give more opportunity for Tipperary to analyse them, more opportunity for Limerick to analyse Cork as well. Limerick have the ones been over-analysed probably in recent years by the opposition. They're just beavering away in the background there. Limerick don't have to worry about, Austin Gleeson picking up a suspension. They don't have to worry about losing players. It's just injuries between now and then, whereas Cork and Waterford will hopefully get over the weekend, next weekend, without an injury, without a suspension. And can I just say something on the league final as well? I think it's important that it's been moved to Saturday. I think it gives the league final. It always has a bit massive importance, but they've just heightened its importance by not having it on the Sunday. That game is going to be played on Saturday now. Win, lose or draw, those teams will be back training on the Tuesday night and will be back in full flow. Where if it's on the Sunday, maybe not, they wouldn't even hardly get a chance to celebrate it. Back probably the Wednesday night. I think it's perfect that it's on the Saturday. It can draw a line in the sand, and once that Monday morning hits, kind of go again.
Yeah, I think Roy O'Connor could have had a penalty at one stage. It might have been around the 38. Oh no, sorry, in the 38 minute, there could have been a penalty going the other way. But even so, just to even take on the points a little bit more about Wexford, the amount of times they shot from 100 yards, and obviously, Darragh Egan's been involved with Tipperary for 3 years before that, and I thought that was something that drove me nuts about Tipperary. You know how many times I've mentioned that. I mean, and it wasn't just that they were shooting from 100 yards. There was players shooting from 100 yards that I wouldn't be comfortable shooting from 30 yards. So it was really frustrating to watch. I've no skin in the game at Wexford, but it was really frustrating to watch all these players shoot from either the sideline or 100 yards. And they got some of them at the start. Like so you don't mind Conor McDonald, for example, having a shot at the sideline if he's got an opportunity to do so, and he got a great point early on. And Rory O'Connor, I think, got a great one from the sideline early on. Charlie McGuckin got one from 100 yards. I think it was Damien Wreck got a nice one too. But it's not sustainable to be shooting from 100 yards. And Darragh Egan will come away from this game, and Niall Corcoran will come away from this game, and the rest of the management team, and that will rock them. There's no way you plan to lose in that sort of manner. But that's one of the key areas that they need to sort. I don't want these backs shooting from 100 yards when I've got Rory O'Connor, arguably the best player in the game, in there waiting for the ball and looking at it going over his head out over the sideline, going wide. And but also, at least to have Lee Chin back, that there is a boost in that.
Was there any sense of, I've only seen the highlights of the game, saw them last night, and obviously when you see the highlights back, they only show the long range efforts to go over the bar, so you learn very little from looking at the highlights of a match. But we're looking forward to looking at later on in the week. Was there any element of Waterford encouraging them to shoot from out the pitch and not pressing them that highly, just to make sure that it was compact at the back and that Rory O'Connor was denied space? I wouldn't mind seeing a behind the goals kind of picture of whether they were actually inviting that on, because that's a really low percentage play. Some of them will go over, but invariably, if you hit 15 shots, you're probably going to be lucky enough if 6 or 7 go over, aren't you?
Yeah, to me, it wasn't necessarily a tactic from Waterford, because they try and press you on the ball no matter where they are. And obviously, Tadhg de Burke will sit back, and he's so unbelievable at doing that role. But that works because everyone out in front of him is putting such pressure on. But to me, it was Wexford planting the feet around the middle of the field in their own 65 and having shots when it was so needless. Just get the ball to Rory O'Connor. He's the best player on form throughout the league. He's probably up there as the best player on form in the league. It's just really, really frustrating to watch.
Hey, it's funny, Shane, just when you said it there, just get the ball into him. Walsh Island were playing Junior C football one day. This will all remain nameless. I don't know who they were playing against, but the big fella in full forward, and he was a bit of an underage sensation, but he had put on a fair bit of weight and had a beer belly or whatever. But he was going to town one day, and he just lets it shout out, "Boys, will you get the ball in? This lad's useless." But it is just a matter of, that's not to say that far from it, anyone that was marking Rory O'Connor is no good. Of course they are. But when you have a player like that, you need to feed him. You need to get him on the ball. And the thing about it now, it does look that probably Waterford probably did analyse Wexford and see that if we can keep tight on him, the Conor Gleeson track him most of the way. I know he got a brilliant hook when Rory O'Connor was going in, and he ended up hand passing the ball kind of across the goal. Was there much evidence of that battle between the two of them? Was Rory O'Connor getting on much ball even, or was he been tracked really well?
Well, stuff that happened, positive stuff that happened for Wexford generally came through Rory O'Connor. And he got on plenty of ball, and he obviously set up that goal chance, or had his own goal chance blocked. He had a couple of wides, he had a couple of scores. He was involved. Even just looking at sort of my own map of the game here, I see his name appearing plenty of times. So he was in the game a lot. I did think it was a little bit strange that he stayed on the frees once Lee Chin came on the field. Now, ultimately, he missed a couple then, and Chin took over the frees. But to me, he's not a 9 out of 10 type free taker. Maybe he can get there because, we talked about Wexford, and one season there, maybe 4 years ago, they had 7 different lads taking frees over the course of the year. It's such a crucial thing to get right. Maybe Chin was, wanted to just focus on his performance when he came in, but I would have thought it'd even get, his confidence up. He's been away for a while with injury, get him in there and just get him taking frees again. But maybe the flip side is they're worried about if he gets injured again, who will take the frees. But that is a bit of an issue for them, I have to say. Martin Furlong says, simply put, Wexford were pathetic. One of the worst performances I've ever seen. Wexford constantly put in these dud performances. Limerick in 2014, Kilkenny in 2015, twice this year already. That is a very strong point made by Martin Furlong there. Please let us know what you think. They obviously had been very good in those 5 league games beforehand. Sully 180, 18-point victory without Stephen Bennett or Pádraig Mahoney starting. Waterford are motoring well, Kilkenny defeat aside. Now, here's what I'm hearing now. You see different rumours flying around that Jamie Barron, Conor Prunty, and one other player is Stephen Bennett, that none of them will be ready for the Munster opener against Tipperary. But the way this Waterford team is playing, and the fact that it seems that you can pull out any player and plug in another player, it just seems like they're all so familiar with the system that, you obviously you drop off a couple of percent because you don't have someone who's as free scoring as Stephen Bennett in the team, for example, or Jamie Barron. Like, remember, he was out for ages, came back against Galway last year and was absolutely unbelievable. So maybe he could do that again. But you'd still be backing Waterford against Tipperary even if those 3 players are out.
There's propaganda. There's propaganda going left, right, and centre here.
Am I wrong?
Mac. Basically, what you want me to say is Waterford will beat Tip without their 3 best players.
And by a point of man, if you don't mind adding that in.
But I agree with you to a point. I think it was huge to put up a performance like they did and score what they did, particularly without Stephen Bennett. Jamie Barron is a player that's going to come back. He'll come back in when he's ready, but Stephen Bennett has generally been the one, putting up huge scores in the forward line, and to do what they did yesterday without him was huge. I don't think all 3 will be missing. I'd say you're probably looking at Barron is probably the one under most pressure. Prunty may miss that first round. Stephen Bennett will more than likely be fit from what I'm hearing, but they are all doubts, and when you have little niggles like that, they can easily reoccur and miss again for a couple of weeks. And at least they have explored the options within their panel, and they have lads that have gotten game time. Like, you look at Cormac Daly again yesterday, you look at the other lads that they've gotten in onto the pitch, got experience during the league. That's huge for them. They wouldn't have planned to have had to start maybe a lot of them against Tipperary, or start lads in the absence of a load of big players, but at least they have time under their belts now and they're there as needed. And Pádraig Mahoney, having played a half against Kilkenny, and Liam Cahill said, we go for 35-40 minutes, get yourself back into it. He played another few minutes yesterday, probably play another few minutes in the final. Caleb Lyons came on. So it is looking pretty rosy in the garden at the moment.
Yeah, without doubt, it's certainly looking very good. And Shane Bennett coming in. Funny that, like, 5 years ago, the attack was more or less built around him and his athleticism and being able to pressure forwards and so on. That these days, it's almost like he played centre back last year. That it's almost like he's the forgotten man at the attack. But as we saw with the way he soloed through and scored that goal, there's still a threat in him too. I
think the great thing about that, Shane, is there's not a reliance on anybody. They don't have to rely on anybody. There's a pressure on lads, but there's no pressure on Shane Bennett to be the man in the forward line. The only pressure, I'm sure, for him is, I want to get in this team. I want to contribute. But they're not, and that's a great thing from Liam Cahill's point of view, in that he could drop anyone or pull anyone off if they're not doing it on a given day. He doesn't have to rely on anybody. They're not overburdened by anybody, really, and I think that's a very, very welcome thing. Shane Bennett came back in on the squad last year, having missed Liam Cahill's first year, not been involved. Started in the forward line, was poor against Clare, ended up back centre back then. Probably wasn't up to scratch in the All-Ireland semi-final. Back in the forward line this year. In and out. I think Liam Cahill would have just laid down the gauntlet to him. You have to play yourself into this team. You know, you're not a guaranteed starter, as a lot of other lads aren't. And it looks like lads are absolutely chomping at the bit when the opportunity comes as a result of that.
River Power says, how is Bennett the forgotten man of the attack? What? I mean, Shane Bennett. I'm pretty sure I said Shane Bennett there. Obviously, very, very good player, but Stephen is the one who's been getting all the limelight in more recent times. And why not? Because he's put up something like 640 during the league. Watford are filled with forgotten men with how they never show up against Limerick. Ouch.
Good man, Flash. Jenny Mac.
Going in heavy there. Yeah, so just for Watford then, Ozzie Gleeson, he scored 2-3. Just one of those was a free. Patrick Curran scored 7. 6 of those were placed balls. Desi Hutchinson with 1-3. Quietly scoring 1-3. He's just setting himself up for a serious season. Jack Prendergast back in. He got a goal, as did Shane Bennett.
That was a bullet, Shane, wasn't it? Prendergast's finish of all the finishes is a bullet.
Like, he started every championship game that Liam Cahill has been manager for. And, you know, you go through all the names and he hasn't been around there recently, but he was most likely going to start in the championship, and why not? I wonder where Peter Hogan is and Ian Kenny. Obviously, Pádraig Mahoney has been worked back into the team, but I wonder, will those two guys get themselves into contention in time for the championship? Let's talk now about Cork and their victory over Kilkenny, 127-220. And, you know, I came away from the game just thinking, Dara Fitzgibbon, this is a lad who has hurler of the year written all over him.
Yeah, he was brilliant the other night, and a couple of really big plays when they were needed, and just even he was making those real hard runs. You know, Barrett centre forward had a ball at one stage, and just Fitzgibbon was gone off his shoulder. He was going off lad's shoulder every chance he got. Lovely little dummy to. Remember in the second half there for his third point to make his 1-3, he had a shot that was probably a 60% shot, and he just faded back inside, took a yard, made it a nearly 95% shot. Just a lad who was playing with huge confidence, and his goal was probably the defining part of the game. You always maybe had it in your head that if Cork got a goal that they were going to kick on, and they did, and just the energy he brings to the table. But like I'd say, Kieran Joyce wasn't too far behind him. And for a young fella, he looks like an old hand in defence. I was just loving some of the really cute things that he was doing. Just even he uses his hand really well. The hand, usually his left hand, just to be really cute, spoil lads, get himself in around the ball. He's really, really physical player. I'd say he probably looks like a centre back in waiting, does he? Yeah. I'd have to say, I think that's what he looks like. When a guy can fill in at midfield, wing back, anywhere, it's just a matter of time getting more experience under his belt, and I'd say he's probably the natural man to fill that number 6 spot.
Yeah, and certainly John Collins on Patreon, he says Joyce looks like a veteran in that side, will eventually slot in at 6. Could we see that before the year is out? Coleman back in at 7, free to roam from deep. That is an interesting prospect of Coleman being able to do that, but I can't imagine they'd put Joyce in at centre back just yet. But he does look like a serious.
Could happen within a game, it mightn't happen at the start of a game, but could happen within a game. Like remember Kyle Hayes going back centre back when Declan Hannon went off against Limerick in 2019. Things can happen within a game that might just work,
Yeah, very true. And Liam Lenihan on Patreon says, only the first half, but Kilkenny's deployment of the short passing game from back to front much improved since last year. It has even improved since the start of the league, and their forwards look sharp in both lines. Some lovely low fast ball going into them too. Yeah, and Mikey Kerry, I think, was particularly good at supplying ball up to the forward line, both stick passing and that hand passing, the hand pass that he did for Pádraig Walsh that time when Walsh went through. Did you come away as a Kilkenny supporter, a massive Kilkenny supporter, thinking that Kilkenny, without TJ Reid now, and to be honest, there was a bit of energy in that forward line, which is maybe the upside of having a younger lad in there, maybe rather than a 34 to 35-year-old lad in there, who's still absolutely, one of the best players in the game and will be guaranteed his position come championship. But there was nice movement and pace around that Kilkenny attack line, I thought. And Owen Cody starting out in the half forward line, he gave Cork awful trouble early in the game. Yeah,
just to take up that point that Liam made about the puck outs, I was actually really impressed with when they played the balls out to the cornerbacks, even Mikey Butler, who maybe it's doesn't look the most natural kind of first receiver. I thought the 20 or 30 yard stick passes out to the wing were really good. And do you know what I really liked is the fact that they always went again. it was a kind of triangle movement, like something you'd see from Limerick. They always went to go again. They got themselves on the front foot a lot. And I think that was, it's hard to know when you're not down there, so I couldn't actually see it, but they couldn't win one of their own puckouts in the last 20-25 minutes. Kilkenny could not get their hands on the ball. Just to bring in the stats on the puckouts there. So Kilkenny had, of their 40 puckouts, 17 of them were short. Okay, so they were all won. How many did they win overall? They won 26 out of 40. So that means they won 9 long puckouts, but lost the 14 other times when they went long. And I would safely say the vast majority of them happened in the last 15 or 20 minutes when they couldn't get their hands on the ball. But before that, at different stages, Mossy Keoghan looked very dangerous. He took Darragh O'Leary really, really well for that goal. I thought at times in the first half, Cian Kenny was really, really good, looked comfortable, was then kind of just pushed out with a small bit, maybe in the second half. But definitely a lot of signs of progress, I would say, tactically in Kilkenny, and a lot of signs of new faces kind of stepping into their breach a small bit. Sometimes teams can not win in defeat, but I don't think they lost much in defeat. I'll put it to you that way. I think they would have learned an awful lot. And it's funny, one of our commenters had it in there, and I just find it here. Quid Pro Quo, which is a great name, said there was 13 fouls to 2 in the first half for Cork, and he just said if the two refs were swapped, Waterford would still have won, but KK would have beaten Cork. And I do think that's interesting. I think Kilkenny made a decision that Cork were not going to run rings around them like they did at stages in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, that they were going to hit them. Now, they were overly robust at times. I mean, like Walter Walsh's tackle into the back of one of the Cork lads was an awful tackle. Yeah. But it was overly robust at times. I don't think it was 13-2. I think there's probably 2 or 3 of them maybe that weren't really frees. But I think they made a conscious decision that Cork were not going to run rings around them. They weren't going to ping passes. And they didn't do that. And that's why I was really impressed with Cork. Cork had to win a bit differently. They had to win while really upping the physical stakes. And if you look at it, since the All-Ireland final last year, they've been with Limerick in the league. I would say passing a big physical test. And I think they passed a big physical test the other night against, Kilkenny, while maybe not the biggest men all over the pitch, they will get in your face physically. And I think Cork fronted up really, really well after what was a really slow start. They got into the game. And you'd have to say, particularly in that last 20-25 minutes, they were much the better team.
Yeah, I do agree with you about a couple of those frees being a little bit soft. There was one, Robbie O'Flynn was fouled in the 10th minute, and at the time I watched it and I was like, what's the free for? They showed the replay and I was still thinking, what's the free for? I don't get that one at all. David Blanchfield was called for fouling the ball at one stage.
Yeah, that was wrong. Yeah. And
I was like, he clearly touched it on the stick. So there was a couple of those frees and that there were question marks over, but Kilkenny started the game unbelievably well. I think they had 8 of the first 9 chances. Darragh Fitzgibbon scored a point for Cork to level it early on, but they were just all over Cork. Then Mark Coleman had a long-range free that didn't go over. Hoggy then did score a point in the 10th minute, as I said, from that free that shouldn't have been a free. So the Coleman free was from 100 yards. So in terms of what they actually created in the first 13 minutes of the game, they didn't create anything really. So such a non-start to the game to recover like that was exceptional. But they could have had more goals in that first half. Kilkenny, Wally Walsh, he went wide from a narrow angle. Hit the post. That was a crazy one. Mossy Keoghan obviously got a couple of goals, 2 for him on the day. Billy Ryan had a goal on. And you know what? You come away from it thinking, Cork, obviously they have all the scorers in the world. No problem at all. There's some lads that didn't even feature in that game that are top-end scorers. And yet, the same old issues about the defence are there. The entire full back line looked really, really ropey in this game, and they could have been taken for far more.
Yeah, and you just wonder with Darragh O'Leary. I think Kieran Kingston said he picked up a knock. He did look under pressure. I was surprised how easily Mossy Keoghan rounded him even for that goal. That would definitely be a worry for them. And as you say, Owen Cody ended up with 4. Billy Ryan ended up with 4. Billy Ryan ended up with a similar type of performance as he had up until the start of extra time, you'd say, in that All-Ireland semi-final last year. So there definitely are some worries there. Listen, they're probably never going to be, unbelievably secure at the back, but they'll always fancy their chances of putting up a massive score at the other end. And they will the vast majority of the time. But when they come up against the likes of a Limerick or that, like they're going to have to be more solid at the back. They can still have all the flair up front, but they're going to need to mix. They're going to need to mix that solidity at the back with the flair up front and find a kind of a happy balance if they're going to win All Ireland.
But wasn't there a bit of a vibe of the All-Ireland final where they left their full backline thrown to the Wolves early on in this game against Kilkenny? And maybe if Kilkenny had a bit more about them in attack, they would have added even more scores.
Yeah,
if that's TJ.
Yeah, fair point, yeah. No, absolutely fair point, yeah. And the TJ one is interesting. I do think from a Kilkenny point of view, it's great for them that much like what we said about Monaghan footballers earlier on, they're going to have to go without Conor McManus eventually. So other lads are going to have to step up. So I don't necessarily think that this league is a bad thing without TJ. When he comes back in, we know what he's going to give or whatever, but other lads have had to step up. Even at different stages, Alan Murphy has stepped up even on the frees at different stages as well. Thought he was kind of harshly done for leaving the hurling or in around Robbie O'Flynn at one stage, which I wasn't 100% sure was a free. But just as Andrew was saying there about Tim O'Mahony, just even mentioning him, I thought he added an awful lot when he came in. I thought Seamus Harnedy got on 2 or 3 big balls. Like it's like when you're in the cut and thrust at the last 10 or 15 minutes of a game, that's when you like Harnedy is visible at most stages of a game. But you really need, that's when balls end up usually going long, and you need somebody to win that type of ball. And he got a couple of balls, won a couple of crucial frees as well. Something I want to say as well: Hoggy does not like that luminous ball one bit.
No,
he does not like it one bit. And like you don't see players tweeting much about anything now. But I just saw even the tweet he put out there a couple of weeks ago about the ball as well. He was gesturing towards the linesman at one stage. About the ball, didn't look like he liked it at all. I'm trying to find his tweet there from a couple of weeks ago. I have it here. Yeah, he just doesn't like this ball for whatever reason. And he said a couple of weeks ago, geez, he's after tweeting a lot. He just said we used to have a great sport, and put a picture of the white ball and just said yellow out. He didn't look comfortable at any stage. Like even that free that he totally mishit, that like Alan Connolly did unbelievably well. But that was another errant free. There was they said on commentary, Brian Tyre said on commentary, on Rudis Anovis Eamtalk, what's rare is wonderful. And it happened twice because he missed, frees by quite a distance that he wouldn't normally. But it's a good sign for Cork that they're winning games when he's not the one controlling the whole thing as well, I suppose, too.
Yeah, do you know what? During a couple of games, I've made a note during a certain period of the game when I thought, geez, Pádraig Walsh hasn't been in the game for a while. Like he's 15 points scored in 4 games, which is great going since he's been moved back to the half-hour line. But during the second half here, I made a note saying, I haven't really seen much of him in the second half. But if you're not dominating the play or, going 50-50 in the game in terms of winning ball, you're going to struggle to get your centre forward in, your Roman centre forward. Now, he did roar back into the game late on, as he generally does. But it kind of fed into a little stat that I had midway through the game, which is between the 40th minute and the 63rd minute, Kilkenny managed just a point from play, which, that's not too far off a third of the game, and you're struggling to score from open play at all. And you just wonder, is this going to be the thing that catches up with Kilkenny as the game goes on? Like, what areas do you see Kilkenny being weak? I would say they've still got great competitors, lads who go in and fight for the ball. But there's definitely a little bit of class lacking in this team at the moment, and that might be the thing that catches them out again. Yeah,
the Pádraig Walsh thing, like Pádraig was inside a lot on the
other night.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I like to have a couple of inside forwards. Owen Cody's an inside forward, natural inside forward, even though he did well in the wing. Billy Ryan's a natural inside forward. Like, it wouldn't be a big departure to have Wally in on the edge of the square as well. So, like, I wouldn't have said Pádraig Walsh is your natural inside forward. He's a floater out around that middle third, I would have said. So I did think that was interesting. Yeah, I would probably still agree with you. There is probably still an absence of class. They have a couple of like big players. I would say Owen Cody has the potential to be that real match winner, but we haven't really seen it at senior level. But we probably expect to see it over the next while. But there's absolutely no doubt that they're going to absolutely horse it into you all over the pitch. And as we said earlier, the standards in Leinster are a bit lower. There's no point in saying any different. So based on the other night and what you expect to see when TJ comes back, like they're right up the top of the pecking order. You'd have to say in Leinster, and they have a great chance of doing a treble in Leinster. And if they do that, then they're in the last 4 again, and all bets are off at that stage.
Yeah, referee was a mess overall, says Flash, some serious bad calls throughout. And he did pretty well in other situations too, so I wouldn't just say he's fully bad. Cork will not win anything until they improve physically, says Declan O'Keefe. Cork,
I think they are improving physically, I have to say.
I think so too. They're quite... But I do think the things that we know Cork are good at, which is attacking and running at you, still remain. The questions over the defence also still remain. And it's going to be huge shadow boxing in this league final, surely. Slightly changed teams, maybe tactics not fully developed. In this more a sense of, lads, just go out and hurl and get a good run out here. Do you
think so?
It's just so close to the championship at this stage.
Are you talking about close to the championship or close to them playing again each other in championship?
A bit of both.
Yeah, see, I don't... it's funny with that championship. Like, Cork are only looking at Limerick, to me anyway. You're planning for that first game. There'd be a bit of analysis done on the other teams, but it'd be focused week on week thereafter. I'm not so sure. I'd put it to you this way though: if there's any injury doubts or anything like that, they won't be playing, and they'll make sure they have them right for championship. But I don't expect too much shadow boxing. Cork are focused on Limerick for championship. Waterford are focused on Tipperary. I think when they meet in championship, they'll meet. But I think they'll both go pretty hard at it. I don't expect too much shadow boxing this weekend. Well, I'm hoping not anyway.
Yeah, I don't see Waterford putting out their full strength team. I obviously don't see them risking the lads who have been carrying injuries recently. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's... I still think it'll be an excellent game, but I don't see the both teams putting out their strongest 15. I didn't even think Cork put out their very strongest 15. The fact that Tim O'Mahony was on the bench kind of expressed that to some degree. Richard Hogan says, from such a dominant position for Kilkenny, it was really disappointing to lose. Still not enough depth in the squad. Wally, Porrick and TJ in half-forward line for championship might look to go long in Leinster. James S. Verney spending 10 minutes making excuses for his beloved Kilkenny.
What excuses did I make?
Well, just all sorts of excuses.
I don't remember making.
Apparently, you're a jealous culture, says Bruno Fernandez.
I'm a culture anyway.
You definitely are. Cork versus Waterford to be a score fest, says the Shelminator. 35 to 30 points between goals and points to win that. Very interested to see how Tig de Burka handles Cork's sprint team, aka their forward unit. That is a good point. And Shane Bennett, he'll be looking to get ball from centre forward and run at you. And Dara Fitzgibbon coming on the shoulder. Like, if Cork win an All-Ireland this year, unless, Hoggy could have a brilliant year, and I think a bit like Canning in 2017, you could see, the award sort of gravitating towards him. But I think Dara Fitzgibbon... Do you know what? Actually, this was the point I was thinking last night. There's 4 or 5 lads who you could see being hurler of the year for Cork this year. And I was looking at Kilkenny, I was thinking, yeah, Owen Cody has future hurler of the year written all over him. But there wasn't too many others. And maybe not enough candidates to make me think that they could win an All-Ireland. But, like, would you agree with that in the sense of Waterford and Cork or whatever? You can see a load of lads who could line up to be hurler of the year.
Yeah, they have an awful lot of candidates, yeah. They have an awful lot of class. There's a greater spread of class, you'd have to say. Greater options, like I'll put it to you this way, whatever we were talking about hurler of the year, how many Kilkenny lads can you see winning All-Stars at the end of the year? Just this lad, this lad is somebody I know. I don't care. It's definitely somebody I know.
Verney is just a cynical farmer.
A cynical farmer. Definitely somebody I know. But there's still only a handful of Kilkenny guys that you could probably see even, winning an All-Star at the end of the year, whereas, probably any of 12 for Waterford or Cork could potentially win All-Stars at the end of the year, such as, the distribution of class probably across the teams,
Yeah, Precise Comments says, Verney can't stand seeing Cork doing well.
Is that Bruno Fernandez in the picture? It kind of looks a bit like James Barry.
It is, well, yeah, okay. But yeah, it is Bruno Fernandez, all right. Let's see. Aussie on his day is one of the best players. If he's out, he's the lots for the final. He definitely is. Positive from Saturday night was Kilkenny under-20s only losing by a few points to Cork. Needed under-20 title badly. I've said this before.
They played a challenge game, Shane, in the park before the senior game, which is a great idea. Brilliant idea.
Yeah, it's a shame you don't see more of that. Joe Butler, in fairness to the Cork defence, the half-back line blotted out Kilkenny in the last 25 minutes with O'Mahony outstanding. John O'Sullivan says Tim O'Mahony's up there with Kyle Hayes with the best half-backs in the country. Who else is in that list there? I'd say Calum Lyons is certainly in it. The edge, persistence is all they need in defence. Like the Limerick League game, remains to be seen if they can replicate it. Outside the fair shoulder, you can't make blooded contact without fouling. Is that the edge from the WWE days? Where's Christian?
And Gangrel, the brood.
Verney's excuses were Kilkenny had a good plan with not letting Cork run around. Failed anyway.
No, I'm not making an excuse. They couldn't win the puck out in the last 20 minutes. That was the big problem. And worryingly for them is that they reverted to type when they needed to stick with what they were doing earlier on. So there's signs of a tactical evolution. But then, when you really have to go and do it and the pressure is on, it looked like they reverted back to truck and ball. And I don't recall them winning a long puck out in the last 15 or 20 minutes. I really don't.
Yeah. Is there any part of you thinking that Kilkenny mightn't retain their Leinster title this year, that they mightn't get out of Leinster?
I was potentially thinking that after the Tipperary game, and then
they've improved a lot since then.
They have, yeah. They blew Dublin away. They blew Dublin away. They had a real good performance against Waterford, and I don't think they lost much in defeat the other night now either. So I'd be if I was from Kilkenny, I'd be confident going into Leinster. Confident enough.
Yeah, you've no interest in Kilkenny at all. What you definitely do have interest in is Offaly and their defeat to Antrim in the relegation playoff the other night. Funnily enough, I've seen it been recorded as 224 to 217 in some places. There was some talk that the penalty was disallowed at the end, but I didn't see any evidence of that. At a very minimum, I thought it would have been retaken from Kieran Clark. But it was 324 to 217 is what I had down. James McNaughton, Keelan Malloy and Kieran Clark, they scored the goals, guaranteeing top flight status for next year. And Down could join them up there if they win their league final at the weekend. So that would be 2 out of the top 12 teams would be from Ulster, which would be something considering the commentary that you would have about hurling in the north in terms of the overall strength beyond Antrim. What are your thoughts on this game? Because I have to say I wasn't blown away by Offaly at all in this game, and Antrim's running power. And we talked about Keelan Malloy in the preview show on Thursday at patreon.com/OurGame. Keelan Malloy, the way he was able to run through the centre, the way James McNaughton was able to run through the centre, if anything, it could have been more.
Yeah, the Keelan Malloy point I think is really interesting. He actually played a different role for a large part of the first half. He was more the link man between defence and attack, gotten a lot of good ball, got ball into the half forward line, even into the full forward line. Thought he was really good in that role. But then, like all good players, and particularly when there's a break coming up in play, he sensed an opportunity. All of a sudden he was seen in a way more advanced position than we had seen at any stage in the first half, and he cut through that middle and scored a lovely goal, in fairness to him. But like that happened 5 to 6 times in the first half. Like they could have had 4 or 5 goals at half time. Interesting, Shane. I didn't realise that about the penalty. I'm just looking at the report in the Indo here. It sounds 224 to 217. I didn't see anything wrong. I'd love to know if it was a case of whether he stepped inside the 21 and it was disallowed, or what exactly the scenario was there. So we must check that out and have it sorted for Thursday's show. But Antrim were much the better side. Like James McNaughton cut through the middle there as well. We got ourselves into a good position when it was 1-9 to 12. We think we had 3 or 4 in a row at the end of the first half. Then all of a sudden Antrim had 1-2. It was 1-2 to no score. A couple of problems with sharp puck outs that didn't work out, and they are quite deflating when a sharp puck out just comes out after and it just goes straight back over the bar, and then you're kind of under pressure then trying to win the next one to make up for the one you just lost. But you'd have to say, I even thought physically looking at Antrim that they looked like bigger specimens. They looked like they were more powerful runners. We played very deep in the first half, particularly with the breeze at our backs. And it worked on some occasions. Owen Cattell got 2 great points from distance. And I thought Jason Sampson was brilliant inside in the first half. I think he got 3 from play. I think did he win the penalty as well, and won a couple of frees in there as well. But like the game was over probably with 10 or 15 to go. Antrim had us at arm's length and they kept us there realistically. Big win for Antrim after getting relegated from the Joe McDonagh last year. It's probably a realistic case of where we actually are at the moment. If we were in amongst Antrim, Laois, Westmeath and playing them the whole time, that's the standard that we're at, but we're not up anywhere near the Wexfords, Dublins, or anyone even down towards the bottom end of Division 1,
And what were your thoughts on, you had players back, yet still Antrim could walk through without a hit being put on them. Like, that was the thing that I'd be very frustrated if I was Michael Fennelly and you're setting up the team and you're thinking, well, look, the one thing we're not going to let Antrim do is walk through us. The man might get through, the ball might get through, but the two of them aren't getting through together. But that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and there didn't seem to be any cover thereafter once the first line was broken as well. Like they were getting into the 13, and like Stephen Corcoran pulled off 2 outrageous saves in the second half when they broke that line again, and that was disappointing. There was bodies in around certain areas, but there never seemed to be anyone kind of minding the house. And it was weird because Ben Keneally's been kind of switched to full back recently, and I thought Antrim were really cute. I thought they took him away from the goals even when there was a man coming through. The full forward was just moving to one side and Ben was following him maybe sometimes, and it created a gap in there. But the scoreboard maybe flattered us at stages as well. Antrim could have been further ahead. And for the third year of Michael Fennelly's kind of reign, like they're going to be back in, or sorry, if it's his fourth year when he goes in next year, they're going to be back in 2A. And, you know, barring to win the McDonagh, they're going to be in the McDonagh Cup as well. So the second tier of the league and the second tier of the championship, it's probably realistic to where we are at the moment. Like, I don't want to love, like, we really missed Oisin Kelly at the weekend. We don't have that big goal threat with a big paw at the edge of the square. We just don't have that. If he's back for the McDonagh, it'd be a huge help. But yeah, we're probably a bit shy up front, particularly goal wise.
Yeah, between that and Keelan Kiley not being there either, that's a huge loss. And I was looking at Antrim and I was thinking how they used their spare men and how Owen Campbell was more or less holding the number 6 spot, but he was able to get on the ball and spray it around and hit lovely passes up the field. And when Offaly did get the ball up the field, well, when they were in a position to move it up the field, I felt a bit like Wexford. Too often it was pot shots from distance or from the sideline. And again, that's not really sustainable. Do you go in thinking, and I'll just actually put a couple of comments up first before I ask you this question. Offaly promoted too soon, wouldn't fancy them for McDonagh, says James S. River Power. Offaly really lacked pace, couldn't get near certain Antrim players. SSRI, much hype over the winter for Offaly hurlers and footballers. They've been brought back down to earth fairly quickly. Do you now go into the Joe McDonagh Cup sort of with the mood slightly soured? I mean, if you look at Westmeath last year, they got beaten from pillar to post in a lot of their games, but maybe it stood to them when they won the Joe McDonagh Cup. Offaly know that they're going to meet Antrim at some stage if they're going to win the Joe McDonagh Cup, but this is a fairly dispiriting defeat, you know, and they go into it after just heavy defeat after heavy defeat in the league. It doesn't set them up great for the championship.
Yeah, Westmeath went in. Westmeath hadn't played the league relegation playoff when they played championship last year, so they still had, you know, we get the McDonagh over, see how we go in that, and then we'll come back to the league. Whereas Offaly have been relegated, they already know they've taken a step back when they go back and play championship. To be honest, Shane, I kind of said it the last good while, like, I think getting to a McDonagh final would be progress for Offaly with where we are at the moment. Like, recent years would suggest that we're, like, us and Kerry very, very tight. Like, I haven't, they kind of never really mentioned it before when you were talking about Down, but Down beat Offaly in that Christy Ring semi-final in 2020. Their graph has only gone upwards ever since. So there's not much between us there. Antrim are probably a bit ahead of us as well. Like, so that's kind of the level we're at the moment. And I do agree with what one of the viewers said there. We're probably not blessed with pace and probably not blessed with a huge amount of power as well. And Antrim players definitely looked like they were able to create clear daylight between Offaly lads the other day, whereas we found it much harder to get away from their players. And particularly, that's probably why we were shooting from out the field. I'd be fairly certain that was a tactic of sorts, that we would try and hurt them from out the pitch a bit and try and flood bodies back. And the disappointing thing, Shane, is we did have a lot of bodies back, but a lot of the time they were ineffective. And that's the most worrying thing. If you're totally open and there's no bodies back and the team races through, fair enough, that's your fault. If you have bodies back there but they're ineffective, that's your fault.
Yeah, just a reminder, brought to you by OurGame. If you want to get any of those jerseys on the screen, all counties are covered at OurGame. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. Just a reminder also, please do subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, whether it's Twitter, whatever it might be. Subscribe to the channel there, and also consider signing up for patreon.com/OurGame. A lot of the match reports that we do from games are only behind the paywall there. It's $5 a month, which obviously is very little, and it only takes 30 seconds or so to sign up. So patreon.com/OurGame. Joe Butler says, good show again, guys. Well done. Just start with the hurling in future. I can then go out and do the garden after the hurling. Yeah, well, sometimes we have to work with our guests too, Joe. We can only get Stephen Poacher at 12 o'clock because of his work commitments. So it was great to get him on the show. So
someday for the gardening, I tell you that, because I'd love to be going outside and going to be sitting in front of a laptop for the next 5 hours. Joe, I'd much prefer to be in your position than mine.
Yeah, Joe, you seem to have some life of it. You're always watching the hurling show, and you're getting your gardening done and watching Kilkenny regularly. Division 2A semi-final, Westmeath with a big win over Kerry there, 218 to 21 points. Division 2B semi-final, Donegal 119, Sligo getting the victory with 120. Your former team Wicklow losing that relegation playoff. They'll be down in 3A next year.
Won it. They won it.
Sorry, win it.
Yeah.
16 points to 15 against Mayo. Division 3A semi-final, Roscommon 20 points, Armagh 122. And Division 3B semi-final, Longford 126, comfortably winning against Leitrim, who put up 213. Any particular thoughts on those games? Maybe starting off with Westmeath getting the win over Kerry.
Yeah, and that was hard work. Mikey Boyle was sent off early enough for Kerry, and they still managed to pull through. Davy Glennon got a goal. I think he's missed most of the league with injury, so massive to have him back. Sligo were 8 points down against Donegal at one stage and turned it around. And in that sort of, what would you call that? Is it like Midwest? Is that what you call them in around there? They're neighbouring counties, shall we say? What's the name of the radio station up there?
It's not Midwest. It's Midlands.
Oh no, it's not Midlands, is it? I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. But these two are basically, they're obviously in on top of each other. But Donegal would have traditionally been, a bit stronger than Sligo in recent years. But Sligo have come up through the divisions really well. They won. Side? Yeah, I think Shannonside is more Roscommon.
I tuned out of what you were saying for a minute. So
I think it's Ocean FM actually, because
they're not even sure what you're talking about.
But Sligo won 3B, won 3A, and now they have a chance of winning 2B. There was a great one a few years ago when Down were beaten in the 2B final. It was to be or not to be. That was the headline. But that's a great win for Sligo. Gerald O'Kelly Lynch was actually missing, was he? He actually was missing, which is a huge win for them. Andrew Kilcullen hit 1-6, so Gerald O'Kelly Lynch is usually the main man. I know Tony O'Kelly Lynch's brother was playing there, but a big win for Sligo there. Big win for Wicklow as well, 16-15 against Mayo. And Armagh finished strongly to beat Roscommon 122 to 120. Roscommon were down to 13 players, so they reached the 3A final. They're playing Tyrone in that, so I think all those will be played next weekend. And SSRI is right. Sligo probably are the most improved team in the country. They were playing Christy Ring while still being in Division 3B, so they were in the 5th tier of the league while being in the 3rd tier of the championship, which would have been unheard of really in recent years. But they're definitely one of the most improved teams in the country, you'd have to say. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it for the show today. Is it, Michael? Anything you want to finish up with? No, breathless weekend and a breathless show. We've earned I've earned my grapes and my water. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Reminder again, we are brought to you by olgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame, you'll get 15% off any of these. If you want to see Thursday's show, go to patreon.com/OurGame. $5 a month is absolutely nothing, and it only takes about 60 seconds to sign up. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll chat to you again soon. Cheers, Shane.